2.
Hey everyone, I am SuperFizz from the EthStaker community, and I'm here with Rocket Pool tonight and a couple other guests. We're super excited super. I try never to say super because it's already in my name. We're really excited to welcome you guys here as we do a walkthrough of the latest release candidate for Rocket Pool, as well as demo their Grafana dashboard, which I am completely obsessed with right now. I'm completely obsessed with a lot of things. So I'm going to make the introduction rounds, and then we're going to hop right in. Our special guest of the night is Joe Klappis, who you know as JCRTP. Hello, Joe. Joe is, well, you'll find out more. We also have Dave Rugendijk from Rocket Pool.
Hey,
wait,
good morning,
I should have said
everyone.
Dave first. I'm gonna reverse that. Dave first, then Joe.
Probably a good idea.
Or yeah, sorry. Darren Langley is with us from Rocket Pool. Welcome.
Hello. Hello, everybody.
And from the EthStaker side, we have Michael or Unvetica.eth, who runs our engineering. We have Enan with his friend Beaker, who they are having a blast in Austria right now, and we're going to boot them from the stream in just a moment as they continue their party. Yeah. So yeah. And watch this. Sorry. And welcome James Carnley.eth, who is hanging out with EthStaker, and we're glad to have his company on the call. How's everyone today?
Yeah, it's a weird thing. We've got people from all over the world, all sorts of different time zones. I'm doing fantastic. I've been looking forward to doing this for a very long time. I've had this Pi sitting in this bag for like 2 weeks, and I really want to build it. So if nothing else, I'm super excited about that part.
Awesome. And we're glad. So I will be honest. One of the critiques I've heard about Rocket Pool as I pump it to everyone is, hey, there are no metrics available, and we don't even know what's going on under the hood. And so with this release candidate dropping the Grafana dashboard, I'm really excited to share this with everyone and get it out. So let me tell you what's going to happen tonight. Our target is to have a workshop that's going to be less than 2 hours. And what we want to do are hit 2 major goals that I'm aware of. We want to demonstrate the installation of the latest Rocket Pool Smart Node software on a Raspberry Pi. At some point, it's funny because Joe and I talk about this a little bit. I'm not a huge fan of Raspberry Pis for running smart nodes, but Joe assures me that it is totally production ready. And I have to acknowledge he's a lot smarter than I am. So if Joe says it, I believe it. So we're going to demo the installation of that smart node software on a Raspberry Pi, which you can do in production if you want to run a smart node with 16 ETH or more. And the other half is really just demoing how that software works, getting into the Grafana dashboard, and just kind of going through it. We also want to answer a bunch of questions and help everyone feel comfortable with the product. Does that sound about right?
Yeah, I mean, what I would like to do is show off both sides of the coin, both the node operation side and the traditional pool staking side. We've had a lot of questions about both, so I'm happy to go into detail on the process for both. Now, the pool staking side takes like 5 minutes to do, so it's going to be a little one-sided, and the rest of it's going to be about the node operation, but I'd like to show both.
Awesome. We will have a POAP that's going to go out about halfway through. And we are looking out for questions that we can answer on the YouTube stream, in the Rocket Pool, I was going to say trading channel because that's the only one that I've ever been in, the Rocket Pool trading channel, and we have one other source. Well, no, that's fine. Those 2. So please feel free to hit us up on YouTube or in Rocket Pool. Any public channel should be fine. So with that, we're ready to hit it off, Joe?
I'm ready.
Great.
Okay. Well, I will start by introducing myself and some of the team members as well. So my name is Joe. I've been with the team since about April when Dave went on this larger hiring spree, and we got a bunch of new faces in the community. I work on the smart node stack most of the time. I also help out with some of the documentation around. So as we're going through and I show you some of the guides that have been produced for both staking and node operation, that's some of the stuff that I work on. I do some integration with other tooling like third-party things and lots of other little jobs here and there kind of around. And so I'm joined with Darren Langley and Dave Rugendijk, who are sort of the masterminds behind the entire protocol, if you will. You guys want to introduce yourselves real quick?
Yeah, I'll go. Good morning, everyone. I'm Dave, the founder of Rocket Pool. So, yeah, any questions, feel free to shoot them my way if you want.
Yes, Dave.
We post, yeah.
Wait, when will Rocket Pool launch?
Oh, God.
Oh, well, touching
That didn't
on that
take long.
subject.
Just get it out of the way.
I know, it's going to be there.
I was just about to say we push it back a day for every time that's asked, but no, we won't do that. Soon, TM. Yeah, won't be long now.
You said
Soon.
you didn't say any questions. That's, you know.
Yeah, so yeah, I know it's been a long wait, but we really have put in a lot of work to make sure this is the best version that can hit mainnet. I mean, the last few months have been just grinding on some of the small stuff, but it's really come together now. So we are really really super stoked to see this go live soon. Yeah.
Okay.
Any other questions? I'll throw it over to Darren.
Hello, I'm the GM of Rocket Pool. Yeah, I'm just going to echo what Dave said. We're really proud of the Rocket Pool that we've got on our Predator testnet. We've finalized the last audits with trailer bits. So we've put in the fixes now. We're just going to confirm those fixes. And then we are kind of ready to start kind of announcing. So we'll keep an kind of eye out for that. And yeah, so it's a really exciting time, and I can't wait to get there. That's me.
I know we're delighted to be with you guys, to have your acquaintance and your company, because the Rocket Pool product has just been so exciting to us for years now, and we're hoping it doesn't stretch to decades too soon. So, all right. Thanks again for joining us. What? I get to make jokes.
Yeah, you do. That's very true. Okay, so we are also joined by Nick Doherty and Kane Wallman, who are just kind of lurking in the shadows and maybe happy to answer questions about the website or the smart contracts as they come up. I suspect people are going to have a lot of questions as this goes, and we're going to be here for a bit. So hopefully anything that they can help with, they'll be there too. But pretty much the entire team is here. It is bright and early in Australia, so thank you guys for coming on a Sunday at like 8 a.m. for this. I really appreciate that. And also before we begin, I wanted to give a special thank you to the EthStaker guys, to the community there, for hosting this. So Unvetica and Superfizz, also to our community members, Gray Wizard and VGR, for helping with coordination, for helping with the live stream, the advertising, and also for the POAPs that you guys are going to be doing. That is definitely a load off of my plate so that I can focus on this and you guys can do all the hard stuff. So I'm very, very grateful for you doing that. Thank you very much. What we are basically going to cover today, as I go through this demo, it's going to be a very kind of relaxed, sort of fireside chatty sort of thing. It's not going to be super official by any stretch of the imagination. I have a Pi, it needs to be set up, and I thought it might be fun if I invite you guys to set it up with me instead of me just doing it kind of solo, so that you can see what the experience is like for a new node operator coming in with very little experience in Rocket Pool, and kind of seeing what that process entails. How hard is it? How easy is it? What are the gotchas? That sort of stuff. So we're basically going to go through it together. I've got a Pi here and all the necessary components, and they are still in their box. So I don't even know if they work. They could have sent me a dud, and that would suck if it happened, but I've got a backup that I know works just in case. But we're going to go through this like an actual node operator. But I also want to cover the other side of the coin, the staking experience for non-node operators, people who just want to stake their Ether very quickly and efficiently and be done with it, don't want to run any of the hardware. And then I want to give, at the very beginning, kind of a TLDR view of what Rocket Pool actually is and what differentiates it from some of the other staking providers or services out there. So I think we'll probably start there, then we'll get into the pool staking view, and then we'll get into the node operator because that one's a little bit more complicated. Okay, so as far as what Rocket Pool is, there is a lot of material already, a lot of really great resources that describe this in detail. So Dave has written a pretty comprehensive explainer series on Medium that covers a lot of the different facets of the pool. And our community member, Logic Beach, actually put together some YouTube videos to help kind of give a summary view of what the pool in the protocol looks like and how it works and the different components involved as well. So there's a lot of good information out there. I'm not going to cover everything here because this is not supposed to be a stream about what is Rocket Pool, but I want to make sure that people who are tuning in for the first time have a bit of a grounding to kind of understand the terminology as I go through. So I'll give you a TLDR, and if you are interested in learning more about it, I encourage you to go explore some of those resources. Our website has a lot of information on it. Our Discord community is outstanding. Some channels more than others, but that's okay. And we try really hard to help people who are new to the game and want to learn more and stake sort of in this safe environment, essentially. So that's what I'll get into as I'm doing the demonstration, that safe environment. But for now, essentially, here's a 5-minute summary of Rocket Pool. Rocket Pool is a staking protocol for the Beacon chain, also known as ETH2 colloquially. It's stored entirely on the Ethereum chain as a series of smart contracts. So on the ETH1 chain, what you would call it. We build a bunch of smart contracts that live on ETH1, and we handle this whole process through those. So the code is completely transparent. It's all open source. Everybody can see what's going on there. It's all verified, so you can confirm what's on the Ethereum chain is the code that we actually wrote. That's there as well. And anyone can query the state of anything at any given time, right? It's all wide open. There's no secrets involved in this. So normally, if you want to stake with Ethereum, it can be done in 2 ways. The first way is you lock 32 of your Ether onto the Beacon chain or the ETH2 chain to create what's called a validator. And then you run a computer that connects to the execution layer, also known as ETH1, and the consensus layer, known as ETH2, or the terminology, we kind of bounce back and forth. I'm sure you've heard both terms, but I will try to refer to them with the correct terminology, which is execution layer and consensus layer. Just know that ETH1 and ETH2 are what I'm talking about in that case. But when you run a computer that connects to those, that's called a node. And when someone does this process, they are called a solo staker. So if you've ever heard of the term solo staking before, that's what it refers to, is somebody that goes through and stakes their own 32 Ether to create a validator. Now that's expensive. If I take a look at the latest here, and look at this convenient website called Ratio Gang. So shout out to Inside the Simulation for putting this together. Currently, the cost of an Ethereum proof of stake validator is $104,000 and some change. I mean, that's a lot. So as an alternative, if you don't have that kind of capital, or if you don't want to bother with the upkeep of one of those machines, you can take less than 32 Ether and you give it to a company. And the company will use that to run a node for you. That's staking as a service, essentially. These guys, we call them pool stakers in our community. And so this pool will take some commission for their service of running the node, but it also owns your Ether, essentially. You are at its mercy to get your coins back when you want them, and you're at its mercy for that pool not to abuse your Ether, not to get it slashed accidentally, and that kind of stuff. Rocket Pool is a little different. It combines these two ideas, but it does so in a very unique way. It's kind of the first of its kind in this case. It splits the operations involved in staking into 2 parts, similar to what I just described. You have pool stakers and you have node operators. So let me talk about the pool stakers first. In Rocket Pool, pool stakers are people that want to stake any amount of Ether, just like they would in the normal world, all the way down to 0.01. That's as low as I think we can go, and most people probably don't need to stake more than that. But pool stakers will take whatever amount of Ether they want, and through our website, they can stake that into one great big old pile of Ether called the staking pool. And that's all you have to do. You just do a few mouse clicks and your Ether is staked and you're done. You get a regular old token back. It's called RETH when you do this process. And we'll go over a little bit more in detail what RETH actually is. But in a nutshell, it's just an ERC20 token, and you can do whatever you want with that. You can store it in MetaMask. You can store it on a hardware wallet. You can use it in DeFi protocols. Basically, it is a token that inherently grows in value over time. So the same amount of RETH now will actually be worth more later as Rocket Pool accumulates some rewards on the Beacon chain, on the ETH2 chain. So that process is what we call tokenized staking. RETH is a representation of what you put in. You can always claim it back whenever you want, as long as there's enough liquidity in the pool, which is a little tricky before withdrawals are implemented. But you can always claim that back with sufficient liquidity to get your amount back plus interest, plus your earnings, essentially. So that's pool stakers. Node operators are more like solo stakers, and that's the second part of this equation. Node operators are people that run a computer with the full Ethereum software stack on it, just like a regular 32 Ether solo staker. But with Rocket Pool, you only need to provide 16 Ether of capital instead of 32 for a single validator. Rocket Pool's smart contracts will actually match your 16 ETH contribution with 16 ETH from this massive staking pool that I mentioned. It'll pull 16 from there, combine it with your 16 in a 1-to-1 ratio to create essentially a regular old ETH2 validator, with one exception, which is when rewards are implemented on the Beacon chain, all of the rewards for this validator will be sent to one of our smart contracts automatically. And the smart contract will split the rewards between the node operator and between the pool stakers evenly, although it does give a small commission to the node operator for their service, essentially, for helping out with the network and also helping out with the security of the Ethereum or the consensus layer of the Beacon chain. To mitigate against abuse in this case, node operators also have to stake some RPL, which is our governance token, and that acts as insurance for the pool stakers. So if the node operator does something malicious or does a terrible job of operating the node or something and ends up with less ETH than they originally started with, less than the 32, the RPL kicks in as a way to ensure that the pool stakers will be made whole again. They'll get their original investment back at the very least. So what makes Rocket Pool different from the other side is essentially anybody can be a pool staker with any amount of Ether down to 0.01. It's totally permissionless. Anybody can use our website. Anybody can be a node operator. Again, that is totally permissionless. Anybody can download our smart node stack and run this process. All of the managing of ETH and RETH and RPL is done entirely by the smart contracts on Ethereum. There's no humans involved that can censor anything for you. And finally, because we are smart contracts, we can actually integrate with any app or any service that can use the Ethereum chain. And we're going to show off a little bit of that later today, so you can see what some of that integration looks like. But okay, at a high level, I think that's a good view, a good TLDR of Rocket Pool, what it is, how it works, what differentiates it from some of the other staking as a service providers. We're not really a provider as much as we are a protocol. Essentially, we're this sort of loose, aggregated confederacy of stakers all around the world that are, some are node operators and some are pool stakers, and they kind of join forces to help bolster the health and the decentralization of the Beacon chain. But if you would like to learn more, I invite everybody to take a look at our websites. You can join our Discord server as well. Again, we've got lots of explanatory material and a very helpful community. Okay.
We'll add to links to the documentation that Joe has been referencing, along with the explainer series, and direct link to the Rocket Pool Discord are all linked in the live stream video description right now. So if you want to follow along, if you want to page through some documentation as we're going through today, please feel free to do so. There, it's all right there and ready to go.
Good.
And a great overview, Joe, by the way. Thank you very much.
Oh, you're welcome. Happy to help sort of clear the air with respect to the terminology and things like that. I'll try as I go through and run into more terms that haven't been introduced before. I'll try to explain what they mean and what they are so that everybody's on the same page. I think that's fair. Let's see. And it looks like I have a quick question from our chat channel in our Discord server. Where can I get test tokens? Togepi asks. I'm actually going to cover that as I go through the process. I'm going to walk through both sides, the pool staking side and the node operating side, as though I were someone who was doing this for the first time. And I'll show you, the documentation explains how to get those test tokens. And so I'll walk you through that process too. And I'll show what that looks like. Okay. So with that, I think we can probably go ahead and get started with the node operator side. Let me switch camera views a little. Let me move this over. There we go. I'm going to finagle with some resolution to make this work for both views. Okay, that's probably good. Let's see. And let me turn that off for now. How does that look? Can you guys see both screens okay?
Yep, looks great.
Outstanding. So this is going to be, on the left side, you've got our documentation site. And this is basically going to be where you want to go. It's docs.rocketpool.net for any information about the protocol. There's our overview button here that gives you more info and insights into how it works. I've got this guides button that's going to help walk you through the process of staking, whether you want to be a pool staker or a node operator. And then I've got this for developers button. That's still a work in progress. That's our developer documentation for people that want to integrate with it, like I mentioned. So there is some stuff in there. It's a little out of date, and we're going to get that fully fleshed out before we launch on mainnet. But right now, I'm going to go through this process here for the guides. Okay, inside the guides overview page, there's a little bit of information about what the different types of stakers in Rocket Pool are. I mentioned this whole thing about being a pool staker, and this whole thing here about being a node operator. So I'll start with the staking guide. You'll see just how easy it is to stake with Rocket Pool. Before I do, I want to highlight the fact that Rocket Pool hasn't launched yet. So we are currently operating on a testnet. We are using the Goerli testnet for ETH1 and the Prater testnet for ETH2 for the beacon chain. So if you are watching this, please, please, please do not spend any of your real Ether on the real like Ethereum mainnet, because you will lose it forever. Please don't do that. The guides will explain to you how to work with a test net, how to use it, and we'll go through that process, and how to gain free test Ether that you can use to play with this process. So while mechanically this is identical to what it will look like on mainnet, you're not getting any real rewards for real money by doing this. So full disclosure, just please keep in mind this is a test net. It is monopoly money. I have to make that very clear. Okay, good. So let's start with the staker's guide. I'll start by checking out this staking overview here. And this is kind of an explanation of how staking on the Ethereum 2 chain works, what proof of stake actually looks like, and how Rocket Pool works. This essentially covers what I just did, although it goes into a little bit more detail. So if you are interested in a little bit more detail, I encourage you to take a look at that website and explore. It does kind of talk a little bit about this whole notion of pool liquidity, which is where if you want to unstake, you have to make sure there's enough Ether in that staking pool to pull it back. And that may not necessarily be the case before withdrawals on the beacon chain are implemented. They're not currently implemented. So any Ether you stake, assume it's going to be there for a while. This isn't the kind of thing that you do for a month or so and then take it out. I'm going to mostly skip this for now and just get into the how do I do it kind of stuff, but I encourage anybody who wants to learn a little bit more about the staking process to check out this article. But okay, let's go through this. How to stake with Rocket Pool. In this guide, we're going to walk you through this process of staking your ETH with Rocket Pool, and you provide it for node operators to create new ETH2 validators. So again, this is a pool staking tutorial. And you notice it's only one page. This whole how to stake thing is a single page, and it's actually relatively short, which is one of the things I want to highlight about the protocol. I do also want to highlight this box here that says you do not need to provide any real ETH for this. You will be given fake test ETH for this test net. So the first thing you want to do is install MetaMask. I suspect most people are already familiar with MetaMask as a tool for interacting with the Ethereum sort of ecosystem. So that shouldn't be terribly exciting for any of you. But if you've never done it before, it's essentially an extension that gets put into your browser. I believe it supports Firefox and Chrome and a handful of others. I'm using Firefox here for the demonstration. Once you have MetaMask installed, you want to go to the network dropdown on it and select the Go Early Test Network. So let me open up MetaMask here. And inside, I've got this dropdown where I can pick my networks. The Ethereum mainnet is where all the real Ethereum or the real Ether is. But since we're on a test network, you want to click on this guy here, the Go Early Test Network. And that way you'll be able to work with the Rocket Pool system since it's all monopoly money and fake. The next thing you want to do, probably, this is optional, although I recommend it if you want to keep an eye on your assets. The RETH token I mentioned, the thing that you get back for staking that represents your stake with Rocket Pool, you can add that to MetaMask as well. It's one of those, it's not a well-known coin yet, so you have to add it manually, but the process is quite simple. You want to grab this address from this box here and go down to this add token box. So I'll click on that. And it'll ask me what I want the contract address to be. This is a little short. Let's see if I can make that bigger. There we go. I'm going to paste that in there, and it automatically knows that the symbol is RETH. It has 18 token decimals. I don't have to mess with any of that. So I literally just copy paste this address from the website onto here, click on next, and it says I've got 0 RETH in this, which is good. Okay. Let me finish that off. Add tokens. Now, as far as staking goes, I'll try to do this side by side here. Let me make this slightly bigger. You have to fill it with some test ETH first, your wallet. So head over to the Practicing with the Test Network page for a quick guide on how to use a faucet. So the faucets are essentially mechanisms that give you test Go Early Ether for free. We have one in our Rocket Pool Discord that I'm going to be using. I'm not going to show the Discord on chain here, but you can take a look at what that process looks like. Let me open this in a new tab real quick. Practicing with the Test Network. Getting test ETH on Go Early, that's what I'm interested in. I need some Ether to stake and some to pay for gas things, so I'll do that. Let's see. There's a handy link to our Discord server, and inside of the Discord server is a faucet channel. It's underneath the Testnet group. Everything is kind of organized into groups. And so if you head to the Testnet group and look for the faucet channel, there's a bot in there that has 2 commands. The first one is this Go Early ETH that's going to send 1 Ether for me to play with for testing purposes. I mean, mechanically, the amount you send doesn't matter. It's just the process that's important so you can get a feel for it. So that's the one that I'm going to use today. So I'm going to go back to my MetaMask and I'm going to grab my address. I'll copy that to my clipboard. And now I'm going to go into the faucet channel. I'm going to do this off screen so people can't spy on my Discord here. But I will do Go Early ETH and paste that address. Okay, I see the testnet faucet tells me that the check's passed and it's sending. So I'll wait a little bit until this reads 1 ETH. Wait for it. Unvetic, I feel like we need some of your elevator music during these moments. I've got some really jamming like intro music.
Right.
There we go.
I was about to small chat with you, but then I'm like, what am I going to say?
Yep, got it. All right, 1 Ether. So that didn't take too long. The bot was nice enough to let me know when it finished, and it sent me a transaction ID on Etherscan. There is a Go Early version of Etherscan you can use for tracking things, which is good. Got it. Good. So now I'm done with this part. And everyone's going into the faucet channel now. Nice. So let me go back here now that I've got one of my test ethers. And I want to go to testnet.rocketpool.net. So let me copy that and paste it into my browser here. There we are. Okay. Once you're at this site, click on the Select Wallet button at the top middle of the page and click Connect MetaMask. So I will select my wallets, and I'm using MetaMask conveniently enough, so I'll click on this button. There we go. I was using my different address. I want to use this one. There we go. This is the address I'm looking for. Good. Now what's left to do is deposit your ETH and receive some RETH back. So what inside this box here, this box is going to ask me how much ETH I want to deposit. I can't do all one that I just received because this is an Ethereum transaction. I'm going to have to pay a little bit for gas. So I'll do like 0.9, for example. So if I stake 0.9 ETH by typing that in the box, it says I'm going to get 0.89 RETH back. And why I'm getting 0.89 back is because this testnet has been running for just under a month right now, and we've had a lot of time to accumulate rewards on the beacon chain. So 1 RETH is actually worth more than 1 Ether, or conversely, 1 Ether is worth less than 1 REther. They work the same way. So let me go ahead and click on the Start button here to begin the process. And MetaMask pops up. It asks me if I want to confirm this transaction. I'm going to pay this much in gas for it. So the whole thing is going to cost me this, 0.90105, and I'll say confirm. If I take a look at it here, I see a pending deposit. The deposit just finished. And now in real time, my counter goes down. So this is how much ETH I have, and this is how much RETH I have. And I can confirm that by taking a look at my wallet. If I go to my assets, I've got a little bit of Ether left and a little bit of REther now. And that's it. As far as staking is concerned, I'm done. That was it. That was me becoming a pool staker. I've thrown my Ether into the staking pool, and I can now sit on my REther, or I can use it in DeFi apps. I can apply it in other places. That's all there is to the process. As far as unstaking goes, you do that whole thing just in reverse. So I'll click this little set of double arrows here, and it's going to ask me how much Ether I want to unstake and how much Ether I will receive in turn for doing that. Now, I can't do this right now because there's a 24-hour cooldown between when you stake and when you unstake to help prevent gaming the system. And I mean, if you're staking Ether, you're going to be doing it for a while. If you do the short term, you might end up paying more in the gas fees than you would actually get in beacon rewards. So if you're staking, plan on this being a long-term investment, but that is the process of how you do it. And then it's exactly the same after that. You just hit start. Once you enter how much RETH you want to unstake, and you get the corresponding amount of Ether back with a small gas fee. And that's it. So there's one last thing I want to highlight, and I mentioned this before, but I really want to enforce it again. In order to get ETH back by returning our ETH, there has to be a sufficient amount of ETH in the staking pool for you to do that. And that comes from 2 sources. Number one, it comes from other depositors, other pool stakers that want to stake their ETH and just haven't been able to get their Ether into a validator yet. So it's kind of sitting there waiting. The other one is once a validator exits that mini pool from the beacon chain and the rewards are returned to the staking pool, you can get it that way too. But that process of exiting the beacon chain and getting your rewards back from it is not in place yet. The Ethereum core developers are still working on that. It's still a work in progress. And so what I suggest is if you are going to stake with this, just assume you probably won't be able to unstake until that withdrawal process has been added to the Ethereum chain as a whole. I encourage you to really think carefully about how you want to do that, just because of this whole liquidity thing. And that's pretty much it. That is the entire process of becoming a pool staker with Rocket Pool. Any questions about that? I don't see any in our Discord. Do you see any, Fizz?
No, I'm tracking YouTube. I don't see anything that's substantial other than the WinPo app.
Yeah. Okay, that one I understand. Let me see. So as far as when the PO app goes, I will defer to you guys for that. But if there aren't any questions about pool staking.
There is one that might be worth it. It is.
Sure.
And I may have, my attention was divided. I don't think that I heard this. Why you're going to receive a different amount when you unstake. Like the appreciation is I guess a question.
Okay, sure. I'm happy taking that. So Darren or Dave, do you guys want to do that either?
Yeah, I'm happy to answer that one if you want.
Sure.
Yeah, so it's basically when you deposit the Ether into the front end Rocket Pool, it will it will get assigned to a bunch of decentralized node operators. These guys earn rewards over time. The longer they earn rewards, the more the ratio changes essentially due to them earning these rewards. So if you have RETH, it's basically going to gain staking rewards, well, over time based on the performance of the decentralized network and node operators who are earning these rewards. And the way the ratio changes is basically exactly that. It's based on time. So the more rewards these decentralized network and node operators earn, the less RETH you'll get per Ether when you deposit into the front end of Rocket. I'm sure there's a much simpler way to explain that, but I'm just so used to doing it at that level.
Yeah, sure.
Vegas, anything you want to throw in?
I think you guys pegged it pretty well. Or
sure. Yeah.
Are you speaking on mute?
Yeah, Darren, you're.
I think I saw
you
talking, but
yeah, sorry.
we got you now.
Yeah. The RETH exchange rate continuously increases as the rewards build up in the beacon chain. So that's why RETH is essentially worth more than ETH. It continuously increases.
All right, thanks, fellas.
Outstanding. Okay, I see a few more questions that I'll tackle quickly before moving on to the node operation part. So post-merge withdrawing ETH can be limited by RP's liquid availability of ETH. What's the mechanism to ensure availability for withdrawal? And that mechanism is, I mentioned this a couple of times, there are two sources of liquidity. Number one is more people throwing more ETH into the staking pool. And number two is people withdrawing from the beacon chain when they're good and done. There may be a third option, although I believe it is still tentative. It's undecided yet, which is the notion of a transfer or a partial withdrawal that's been discussed by some of the core developers. And the idea of, for example, if your validator has more than 32 Ether, say it has 34 on the beacon chain, you can take everything above 32. So you could take that 2, for example, and you could withdraw just that. So you can continue to validate and continue to accrue rewards, but you also get some of that liquidity back. And if that happens, in that case, our mini pool system, our smart contracts will automatically distribute that out. So the 1 Ether earnings go back to the staking pool minus a commission for the node operator. But that's going to be the same for pretty much any staking as a service provider or any solo staker. Is you just have to assume that once you stake this, it's going to be locked until those withdrawals are implemented and people actually do the withdrawals, essentially. Can RETH be worth less than ETH? It doesn't work that way. So essentially, the worst thing that can happen is RETH can be worth the same as it was originally when you did the deposit. So you grow 0, but you can never grow negative. And that is because RETH is effectively, it's how much of a balance is on the beacon chain for Rocket Pool right now divided by like the initial stake. So the initial stake or how much is on the beacon chain can't ever go lower than how much you initially deposited because of our insurance mechanisms that are in place. If a node operator attacks the network and gets slashed, or they are negligent and get slashed or anything like that, the penalty comes out of their 16 ETH first, and then out of any RPL insurance supplementally. So they would have to be slashed for more than that combined in order for the node operators to be, or in order for the pool stakers to be affected. And we just have not seen that happen, a slashing of that magnitude before. So the worst case is RETH is worth as much as it was when you put it in, but it never goes negative. How does our Rocket Pool manage ETH2 client diversity? I will talk about that when we get onto the node operator section. Are there any centralized servers? We have a telemetry server to monitor things, but that doesn't really count. They pretty much all the things involved in being a pool staker and being a node operator, all of it's handled by smart contracts on the Ethereum chain, all of the sort of meat and potatoes. Everything else is just meant for sort of gauging how the network is doing. Like we've got our own little Grafana dashboard and stuff like that, but that doesn't really count for you guys. So effectively, the entire thing is all running on smart contract without centralized hardware.
Is it fair to say that if Rocket Pool disappeared after mainnet launch, then the protocol would continue running indefinitely until there was some, indefinitely, I guess, because there's always some security upgrade necessary.
Yes. So there are a couple of jokes about $5 wrenches that come to mind, and I really hope that doesn't happen. But essentially, the protocol, once it's live on the Ethereum chain, will continue to live in perpetuity with or without us. Yes. Okay. There are some other questions coming in, but I think those are probably best answered by the community. I'd like to move on to the node operator portion for now. And again, if you have anything that we haven't touched on yet, please, I encourage you, take a look at our subreddits, take a look at our Discord channel, come ask. We all have very friendly communities that are happy to help. Okay, and now we get to the fun part, running a Rocket Pool node. So the first part of this guide discusses a node operator's responsibilities. I'm going to cover this briefly because it also covers a TLDR of what staking on the beacon chain means and what your job as a Rocket Pool node operator is and things like that. But essentially, as a Rocket Pool node operator, you are providing a service to the pool stakers. So you become, in essence, a staking as a service provider. Think about it like that. We are a platform, a protocol that essentially acts as a marketplace for people that want to run as staking as a service providers and people that would like someone to stake their Ether as a service. And the whole thing is decentralized and permissionless because of the way that we've done it with these smart contracts. So as a node operator, think of it like this. You're not just running a validator, you're also providing a service to those people as well. So there's an additional bit of onus and responsibility there. But this will talk a little bit more about what that means. If you are planning on doing this whole process, I encourage you to read that carefully and decide if it's right for you or not, and if you want to take on that responsibility. But the first thing that we'll cover here is this whole choosing a platform thing. Now, this is one of the very first questions we have is, do I need to run this on a local machine at my house, or can I run this on the cloud? Like, can I pay Amazon to run a machine for me? Something like that with AWS. We get that question quite frequently. And we've got a couple of people in our Discord server that are really good at covering the cloud-based stuff and answering it. So shout outs to Looking for Owls, or whatever your name happens to be at the moment, and Yorick Down. Both of those guys are stellar when it comes to looking at VPS performance and options and weighing the local versus the VPS side of things. This will help explain what the requirements are if you're going to do this and which one best suits you. In my personal case, I already have a Pi handy, so I'm going to be running the local node stuff. But if you, the audience, are interested, I could do another kind of follow-on to this that walks through the process of creating a VPS node for people who aren't going to run locally and what the stand-up process looks like for those. Or if you are interested in running locally, but you don't want to run on a Pi and you want to run on something a little bit more substantial, like a traditional nuke or a mini PC or even a full server, you can do that as well. And maybe if there's enough interest in the community, I can do a supplemental kind of follow-on video for that process too. But by and large, the only differences between those guys are the initial operating system setup. Once you've got the operating system ready to go, installing Rocket Pool is the same for all of them. So I will kind of highlight the Raspberry Pi specific parts of what I'm about to do, but there aren't very many of them. Mostly it's just that initial OS setup stuff. And then after that, everything is pretty much the same regardless of what platform you pick. Okay, in this case, I'm going to prepare a local node here. That's what I want to do. And if I take a look at the local node section, you guys can still see this, right? Just making sure.
Yep, looks great.
Outstanding. Okay. If I click on this preparing a local node, there are a couple of options here. And the first one is the selecting staking hardware. So this is the second question we get a lot is, okay, I've decided I want to run on premises. I want to run a machine at my house or somewhere that's not in the cloud. I want to own my hardware. I want to be the master of my own destiny. What do I do? What do I buy? Somebody help me, give me a shopping list or something like that. And so we've done it a little bit differently with Rocket Pool. We actually have a pretty healthy community of people running on the testnet. And so we surveyed all of those people and asked them like, what kind of machine are you running on? And this page here, this selecting staking hardware, goes through a plethora of different options from the large to the small that shows just how diverse running a Rocket Pool node can be from a hardware perspective. I won't go over all of these, but I want to mention that a couple of them briefly. So community member Zero, one of our educators, actually has an entire server that he built. He gave me kind of a stock picture for it, but this is like a full-on tower PC, essentially. And that works just fine. We've also got the components that he picked and how much that was in total, and then a little bit of a explanation of why he picked it and what he likes about it. And that is the same for all of these setups. So this is Dave's setup. Dave Rugendijk, the founder of Rocket Pool, he mentioned his setup on here as well. This is known as his shelf staker. It is a mini ITX build. So it's, again, a full PC, but it's a very tiny full PC. And he talks about what his, He'll tell you in the Discord why he did this if he wants. There's a bit of a story behind the ShelfStaker, but this is his setup as well. So this is what he uses for not just managing his validators, but he also does some extra Rocket Pool stuff on the side for helping ensure sort of the safety and health of the network. But as you scroll through this, you can see that there's a whole bunch of different configurations. I'm not going to go through all of them there, but we've got a laptop here. That works just fine. We've got some nukes. This one is by one of our educators named Ken. He has an older generation one, which still works absolutely fine. And he and I have gotten into a bit of a rivalry when it comes to the efficiency of your staking machine. So he took this to the extreme, and he actually went with a fanless case for his. And I think he's gotten this down to something like 9 or 10 watts, which is pretty good. So this is definitely an option here. And again, you can see the sort of basic setup here and how much it actually costs. There's a little bit of a variance here based on whether or not you want to go with the fanless case, which is effectively a gigantic block of thinned aluminum. This is a more conventional kind of Nook, although this one's newer. And this is Grey Wizard. This is actually yours. And shout out for this picture, because it is one of the most beautiful pictures on this entire list here. I love this thing. But he talks about what he likes about it, some tips to provide for people that are interested in going down that route, his parts list, and how much it actually is. He went a little crazy on the RAM. He's got 64 gigabytes of RAM in this thing. And as you'll see, validators don't require nearly that much. But for the sake of future-proofing and security, that is absolutely something you can do. No problem. Let's see. So there's a couple of different mini PCs here. And then there's me at the very bottom of this list. This is a picture that I took in my dusty old basement of my Pi running. I would say this is definitely the most controversial of the options. A Raspberry Pi is effectively a system on a chip. It's a single board computer. So instead of having a separate motherboard and CPU and RAM and things like that, everything comes on a single box, a single chip, essentially, or a single board. It's all kind of prefabricated and pre-soldered for you. You don't have to do anything special with it except for add a supplemental SSD because the micro SD that it comes with for the operating system is not nearly fast enough for this. So we actually add a USB solid state drive to it for the chain data, but everything else is kind of vanilla. And that's what we're going to set up today. And I'll go into why I chose this as my platform. There's a bit of a story behind this one too, but you can see kind of a collection of the things that I have bought to make this work. So let me actually do this. I will turn on my camera now and minimize this, and you can see what we're going to be playing with today, now that we've gotten to the fun part. So what I have to show here is, number one, this is the Raspberry Pi itself. This is a basic bundle kit that a provider called CanaKit comes with. And this little red box is the Pi. This is your power adapter. I see a couple of blue heat sinks over here. Then there's some literature that describes how to do it. CanaKit is nice because they offer a whole variety of different configurations, including a case and a fan for it. And it also includes a bundle with a micro SD card. So depending on how many components you want or already have, they have a pretty good selection of kits for you. In my case, I just went with the basics. For the case, here, let me move the microphone over a bit. Now I'm getting excited because this is the fun part. For the case, this is actually something that I 3D printed. I don't know if you guys can see the 3D printing lines in there or not, but this cost me like $1.50 in plastic. It actually splits up into two parts, and I'm going to screw them together once the Pi is inside.
I have been begging Joe to let me get him one of those milled copper cases because I think it would be so cool, but I guess it's not frugal. I know that's the antithesis of the Pi is that case costs more than most Nuke setups do. But maybe if we can do one with like a custom Rocket Pool logo on it or whatever, I will consider that to be some nice swag, and I'll make my validator. It would be so hot.
Perhaps we'll talk offline. With it, I've got this guy. This is going to be my little CPU fan. This is a 40 millimeter fan. It runs off of 5 volts. We're actually going to power this by 3.3 volts instead of 5. That's okay. This you don't need to have, but I have it anyway just because I want to prove a point to some of the people in the Discord chat. This is a cell phone power bank. Oh, I forgot the banana. I have to go get that. I have a banana in the fridge for scale, and I totally forgot about it, and I'm going to grab that. So this is a cell phone power bank, and for the first half of the demo, I'm going to be powering off of this. I'm not going to do the whole thing off of this, although this can run for hours and hours and hours. I'm going to run the second half of it off of this guy, which you also don't need, but I have for demonstration. This is a kilowatt, and this is going to show you exactly how much power the Raspberry Pi is pulling. I'm going to plug it into that because, again, I want to prove a point here. Things that you are going to need, you will need one of these. This is a micro SD card. Can you see that? And this is $7 on Amazon right now. 32 gigabyte SD cards are pretty trivial to get, so I just get that from my operating system. And then finally, one of the most important parts is you're going to need a solid state. Solid states for Pis are hit or miss. If you are getting like a normal nuke setup, then most of the time you're going to see somebody recommend like a SATA solid state or an NVMe solid state, and you don't have to worry about this USB nonsense, but we don't have that option with the Pi. So I went with a USB solid state drive. The T5 is the one that I recommend the most because it is purpose built for USB activity. It's specifically designed for this kind of thing, essentially. It's great at reads, it's great at writes. It's got really good performance on it, and you don't have to worry about those like USB to SATA converters because not all of them are compatible with a Pi. We've had that issue with a couple of community members here. Okay, but that's essentially what you're going to need here. So I'm going to click on this preparing a Raspberry Pi guide. If you're not doing a Pi, if you're doing like literally any other conventional setup, this guide here, this preparing a PC, a mini PC or nuke is for you. It's labeled as a work in progress because we're still dealing with the Mac section of it. If you are doing a traditional Linux operating system, then everything is good to go in there. But if you're running on a Mac, then those details haven't been fully fleshed out yet, but we'll get them in for mainnet. But what I'm going to click on here is preparing a Raspberry Pi. Okay, I can kick this off real quick, and then one of the longer operations is going, is probably a good time for a little bit of a kind of community break. But let's take a look here. This setup works with the current implementations of ETH1 and ETH2. So this is something that I have been told in kind of a nutshell is the merge is not going to be any harder on your system than running a ETH1 client or a execution layer client and a consensus layer client or a beacon chain or ETH2 client today. If you can do both of those things, you should be able to do them after the merge. And to kind of prove a point here, we'll get more into this a little bit later.
I think you're on the 9th point you're proving here, buddy. You're stacking them up deep.
Yeah. If I may, let's see. Let me bring this over. I'm going to do a little bit of show and tell here for a second. Let me turn off my Pi camera. So this is what I call my production Pi. And we're going to talk more about this dashboard later on once we actually set it up and stuff. But what I want to show you for now is this is a machine that is running a mainnet version of Geth to accurately simulate what the performance is going to look like there. And then it's running a Praetor version of Nimbus. So I've chosen Nimbus for my ETH2 client because it is probably the lowest on resource consumption. And as what you can see here, I am using 4.4 gigabytes of RAM, again, for a mainnet setup. Nimbus is using one of my cores entirely, and the other ones are only kind of half used, so that's not a big deal. It's running nice and cool. And this lets me see really good details about what my hardware's health looks like. For the most part, it looks like the SSD has room to spare in terms of its latency. The I/O wait time isn't that big except for these little blocks here. I believe these are finality checkpoints. Is when you start seeing a lot of activity, Nimbus has to do some number crunching for that. You can see corresponding boosts in the CPU cycle. But this is why I say Pis aren't a bad idea. I won't complain if anybody doesn't want to use one because they don't trust it for various reasons, especially if you want to run one of the heavier ETH2 clients. It's probably not going to be enough, but for this specific configuration that I have kind of optimized over months and months of time, I can confirm that my Pi is working great. And to prove that, let me show you what one of my validators is doing. I'll drag that over. So this is one of my validators. This is on Praetor, on a test network. This isn't on mainnet because Rocket Pool is not live yet. But I can see I've got 95% effectiveness, which is fine for Praetor given the recent turbulence that's been going on. Most of the time, my optimal inclusion distance is going to be zeros. Lots and lots of zeros here. We got one that was orphaned. That's too bad. Nothing you can do about that. Yeah. And apart from a couple of restarts where I have to do some maintenance and take Nimbus down, I haven't missed a single one. So to me, this says, hey, I'm doing pretty good, just fine. And what I want to show, when I mentioned we've got a little bit of a hint about some of our integration stuff, we're actually partnering with the Beacon Chain team to start to pull Rocket Pool specific metrics about Rocket Pool validators. And this is kind of an example of that. Any validator that belongs to Rocket Pool now gets tagged with this little flare here. So you can clearly see that this is a Rocket Pool thing. It's kind of nice. So I'll get more into this dashboard and more into what all of these lovely numbers mean and why is this APR so high and that kind of stuff. We'll talk about that as we go through the demo and I actually stand this up for real. But I just wanted to give you guys this quick little sneak peek of what you could expect a Pi to look like if you use it on mainnet once we actually launch this thing. Okay. Let me kick off the OS installation real quick, and then I think we've got some community stuff to take care of. So let me move this back. And I'll turn my Pi camera back on. There we go. Good. Okay, so this preliminary setup here covers all the components that I just mentioned to you, the ones that I've got on my table here, and plus a few others and things like that. It gives you some options for some example things. What I've seen is, as far as cases go, having something with a lot of good ventilation is important. We've had some people buy the cheapest cases they could find on Amazon and their temperatures are abysmal. And then they find something with a bit more airflow and it cuts the temperatures by 20 degrees Celsius, which is a big deal. So you'll have to play around with some things a little bit. The next thing is, okay, before I start getting into actually setting this thing up, I want to kind of cut, for the sake of this demonstration, over to this part, installing the operating system. Once this is done, then I'll come back and actually assemble the thing itself. So I'm going to go slightly out of order here, but that's okay. And it says, the fine folks at Canonical have written up a wonderful guide on how to install the Ubuntu server image. So for this, I'm assuming that you're going to be running Ubuntu. Ubuntu comes with a version specifically aimed at Raspberry Pis, and I'll show you how to do that here. So if I click on this guy, the one thing I want to highlight is this here. I specifically call out which version of the image you want to install. All right, so this is now their documentation. We're going to walk you through the process of installing a server on a Raspberry Pi, connecting it using it remotely. Great. The first thing they recommend is grabbing this thing called the Raspberry Pi Imager. They give you an example of how to install it if you're on Ubuntu. If you're not, if you're on Windows or something, you can grab this utility. I'm going to open it up now so you can see what it looks like. And let me actually, this is going to be, there we go. This is going to be the first portion where we start doing some hardware stuff. I don't know if this is going to work live here. Let's see. Oh, actually, let me shut this machine down. I don't need it anymore. Okay, so before anything, the first thing I'm going to do is set up the operating system on my little Evo here.
I love your boldness of just like cutting it fresh from the box live.
Well, like I said, this is meant to emulate what an actual person using Rocket Pool for node operation would go through, right? I don't want like a pre-canned demo of everything working beautifully and rehearsing exactly the script or whatever.
I'd have been like,
no.
Hey, this is brand new.
Like this is, I'm assuming that people who are following this are going to be using Rocket Pool for the first time. They may or may not be setting up a Pi, so they follow some of the instructions, but not all of them. But this is what they're going to be dealing with. So it's important for me to do what they're doing, essentially. So let me open this guy up. Oh, I should mention you'll also need a pair of scissors for this tutorial, but that's out of scope of the parts list.
Ken Smith makes a great point in the chat that one of the metrics a lot of clients use and a lot of evaluators use is initial sync time for an ETH2 node, and that's really not a great metric. You really want to look at the kind of the day-to-day operation. In the future, you can still barely hear me. Am I audible?
I can hear you.
Yeah, keep going.
In the future, there are going to be a more advanced syncing system that will eliminate this kind of multi-day syncing process. So when you're evaluating hardware, focus on operation, not on initial sync.
Yeah, the initial sync part takes a couple of days or whatever, and then after that, you're doing your normal thing for years and years on end or something. The initial sync is trivial. But anyway, let me show you this here. So this is my micro SD reader. I mentioned this in the guide. You're going to need to have one of these. So let me just pop the micro SD card into here. Good. I'll leave that there so you can see the little blinky light doing things. Okay, it's been mounted successfully. Good. The next thing is I'm going to go back to my imager. Let me do this side. And I'm going to choose my operating system. There are a lot of options here, and that's why I specifically call out in the guide, you want to go to the other general purpose operating systems, and you want to go to Ubuntu. And if I scroll down, oh, they fixed it. Good. I was going to have to do something if they hadn't. There is an option here saying 20.04.3 LTS, 64-bit server with long-term support for ARM64 architectures. This is specifically the one that I want for my Raspberry Pi. I want Ubuntu server, vanilla, nothing special, compiled for ARM64. And ARM64 is the name of the instruction set that the Pi runs with. It's not, if you've seen x64 a lot, or x86, that's the instruction set that normal nukes and other machines come with, but the Pi is a little bit different, uses a slightly different one, but I'll take this guy, 64-bit OS. And the next thing is it's going to ask me to choose my storage. This is going to be the 32 gigabyte micro SD card that I just plugged in. It's the only option there, so that's an easy pick. And then I click write. All generic stuff will be erased. Yep, I don't care what's on there. Erase it for me. Bring over this authentication screen. Okay. Starting a download and starting to write. And this is going to take a little while. So we've got some downtime, some time to kill. Anvetica, you got anything you'd like to do in here?
Yeah, why not? I think the people have waited long enough. We can do one of the POAPs right now. So let's go ahead and switch over to that. All right. So for those of you who are watching on the live stream, to sort of celebrate this amazing opportunity that we have to hang out with the Rocket Pool team, we are commemorating that with a POAP, the Rocket Pool Validator Workshop RC7 edition. Go ahead and scan the QR code on the live stream that will allow you to claim today's POAP, and you can put a wallet address in there to put and deposit the POAP. If you have the POAP wallet, you're able to scan the QR code, and it'll automatically be claimed and deposited into your whatever wallet is associated with that app. Those of you who are watching and maybe getting a little may not have the stamina for the whole stream, I would highly recommend staying on. We do have a second POAP that we'll be distributing with a little bit more detail on that to come. So again, go ahead and scan the QR code. If for some reason it doesn't work, there's a direct website link. That link is on the text box, but it's accessible at poap.website/RC7 precheck.
Yeah, the QR is not working.
Yep, that website will be, typically that seems to be what we've experienced, is that it gets a little clogged up with initial requests, but as long as you access that claim code URL, you'll be able to claim today's POAP.
Okay, well, this is writing. I will be right back. I'm going to go get my banana for scale because the Discord will kill me if I don't have it. Excuse me.
We need to talk about storing bananas in the refrigerator. Is that a thing that people do? Because I always
No, but it was specifically bought just for this reason, and I totally forgot it.
We're talking about you. You're supposed to go to the fridge. Does my audio work, Michael?
Yes, it does sound faint.
Oh,
yeah,
you thought about it.
It's still faint, like if you're not trying. You're okay though.
I'm upset.
I am seeing the comments in the YouTube chat that the event is no longer active. I am looking into that right now. So if we stall a little bit.
The QR the QR gives you event not active, but going to the RC7 claim site does work.
Okay. I'll splash that up on the live stream one more time. So those of you who are trying to claim today's POAP, go ahead and reach out to the direct URL, poap.website/RC7 precheck, all one word. That direct URL is up on the live stream now.
Gray Wizard wants to know about my RAM. I have 384 gigs of RAM on my staking machine. It is just in case.
There you go.
There's a 500 times increase speed of RAM, and I just need to have it there. There's a banana for scale. See, but when you put them in the fridge, they get that brown scar.
This banana will be sacrificed for the sake of the stream. I don't think anybody's going to eat it.
What are you going to do with it? Shove it in the pie? I mean, it has to. How are you going to sacrifice it?
I don't know. Maybe I'll take suggestions in the chat.
Sounds dangerous.
Yeah, that could be a bad idea.
Banana violence.
All right.
I can't support that. EthStaker is a loving organization. We promote the rights of bananas. All bananas are welcome in EthStaker.
My instinct is always going to be to mint it as an NFT. So
Well, there you go.
So
okay.
Joe is staking with Rocket Pool on a Raspberry Pi. I come from a slightly different ilk. I'm staking with a HP DL380p server with 32 cores and 384 gigs of RAM and dual failover power supplies. And well, it's the right tool for the job from my perspective. It sounds like an airplane is taking off in my house continually, and my wife hates me because of it, but that's not the point. The point is, if there's ever network turbulence and maybe like my validator is the one that has to propose a block at the worst moment, it's going to be ready. And the Raspberry Pi will be like, help me. And my server will be there to bail it out. So I got your back, Joe.
You know, Fizz, I'm glad people like you are around.
I do it for you, man.
Yeah. At the end of the day, like I mentioned, there's really no shame in whatever configuration you want. I'm not going to complain for somebody that I'm told the correct pronunciation is Nook, so we'll go with that. Bunch of haters.
There's an ongoing discussion about all of your pronunciations in general. If you'd like to just hop in there and...
would you like me to speak with a different accent? I can try to throw in my Aussie. All right. Let me know when we're ready to proceed. The OS is done and I can continue from here. Just give the word.
Yep, go for it.
Oh, okay. That was nice timing. That was nice and easy. So let me press. Now it says basically what it's going to do is it's going to write the operating system image, and then it's going to verify that it wrote it correctly. And so all of that worked out, no problem. You can see here, it mounts the new drive. I mean, granted, this is a Linux machine, but Windows is going to do something similar, maybe. But it's this is going to show you the file system on that. So if you ever want to noodle with anything on the file system, you can do so. Before you unplug it, if I want to highlight this here, the Raspberry Pi imager step is done. I'm going to click next, and this is the Ubuntu server instructions. There is a thing here that talks about how to set up Wi-Fi, and that does involve opening up this this SD card that has the new operating system image on it and changing a couple of files around. So if you're planning on staking over Wi-Fi, you're definitely going to want to pay attention to this step. I'm not going to do that. I'm going to do just a regular Ethernet for the sake of this demo, so I can ignore all of that stuff and I'll just get working straight away. My DHCP server is going to automatically give me an IP address, and I don't have to worry about any of this. So that's the kind of convenience of going with the Ethernet setup. But okay, that looks good. So let me eject the card here. Okay, I believe it's done. Looks good. No more blinky light. Let me pull it out and I can disconnect that. And so this now has my Pi's operating system image on it, and I am ready to go from here. Let me move back to the guide now, to my guide, and I will start talking about how to set it up.
Can we
So-
create the banana as an NFT and distribute it fractionally? Sorry.
Entirely possible. I mean, it is a fridge banana, so I'm not sure who would bother buying it, but if you really want to, we can do that. And this is, again, just a banana for scale, so you can see how tiny this thing is compared to a traditional server. But now what I'm basically going to do is go through the guide and install everything and put things together. For the most part, this is going to be self-explanatory, but I do want to highlight this one part here about making the fan run more quietly and changing what power pins the fan is connected to. So normally it's a 5-volt fan. You're supposed to connect it to the 5-volt power supply, but I'm going to run it on 3.3 just so it's slower and quieter, and it should still give me fine temperatures. So let's go ahead and build this thing. Oh man, I've been waiting a long time to open this guy. Let's do it.
I have a somewhat serious question. Are you doing optimal Raspberry Pi build, or are you doing standard build?
I'm doing standard. So specifically, he is referring to Docker versus native. When we get to that portion, I'll explain in more detail what it is. But for the sake of this demo, I'm going to do a Docker build, the easy one. The native one takes a little bit longer to set up. It's not really meant for a general audience. It's meant for people who are familiar with Linux systems and how services work and how to do manual configuration and that kind of thing. And that's a little bit beyond the scope of this particular thing.
To clarify just a bit, I was curious about the choice of fan powering, if that was like a standard setup, or if you've tweaked it and you have a specialized setup.
I don't think so. I mean, I've tweaked it in the sense that I 3D printed a case, but other than that, I basically just grabbed a 40 millimeter fan off of Amazon that looked like it would be nice and fast and ran on 5 volts. So that's nothing. Okay. There's nothing special about that.
I haven't used Pi's in a year or two, so I'm just out of the loop.
Yeah, if you're interested, this is specifically the fan that I grabbed. It's called WinSyn. They come in a pack of 5 like this. This whole thing was like, I don't know, $8-9, something like that at the time. So I have these just lying around for hobby stuff, but it doesn't really matter which fan you grab. Okie dokie. So I've got my heat sinks here. That's good. I'm going to need them. I got my case and my fan. I've got the Pi itself. I've got my power supply. I've got my micro SD card with my operating system on it. And I've got my SSD. So I'll start with the Pi itself. Open this box up. And if you guys have never seen one of these before, this is what a Raspberry Pi looks like. Don't need that anymore. Got some little flak on the board here. So this is what we're looking at. There's the CPU here. There's the RAM. There's a couple of other things. This is, I believe, is the Ethernet controller. There's the USB controller. So this is an entire system on a chip. It's a single board computer. Actually, there is one thing that I should probably highlight. So let me grab the Mechanikit stuff again. When you grab the Mechanikit, one of these kits that comes with a manual, I should point out for new people, this page specifically, because this is going to tell you where to put the heat sinks, and that's an important portion. You can figure out which heat sinks are going to go where based on the size and shapes of the chip, but this is going to tell you which chips that they expect you to put it on. And then a little down below, they have pretty much the same diagram that I have with respect to where you want to place the fan, whether it's 5 volts or 3.3 volts. So here we're going to do a heatsink on the CPU, a heatsink on the memory, and a heatsink on the USB controller, since we're going to have a USB solid state drive. That just makes sense. Okay. Also, among the shopping list of things that I didn't mention are a convenient pair of tweezers. Again, if you don't have one of these, I encourage you to get them because tweezers are handy for all sorts of things. Let's install these heatsinks now. You know, off topic, I really don't know how those educational YouTube channels do this. It's really hard to do this sideways while I'm trying to stare at the camera to make sure that like I'm angling things correctly.
Yeah, I actually, when I was first setting up Nimbus on my Google Pixel phone, I was going to do a video cast of it. And I tried for like 20 minutes and was like, screw it. I can't do it.
Yeah, I don't blame you. All right, this blue stuff. This is a question that we've had in the chat before. This blue stuff is not adhesive. This is tape. This is protective backing. So when you install the heatsink, you want to take off the blue stuff. See if I can do that here. There we go. There's one. The orientation of how you install these things probably doesn't matter. I like to do it like this so that they are all kind of lined up the same way. So I'll put this CPU heatsink on first. And you don't have to get it exactly 100% spot on correct. You can loosen it a little bit. There we go. There's the CPU heatsink. This is the RAM heatsink. You can tell because it's the size and shape of that memory chip there. Let's take off that blue film. Okay. There is our RAM heatsink installed. And now for the USB controller. Swear to God, the hardest part is getting that tape off. Good. And this is going to be a little hard to do on camera, but I'll try. Yeah, that's not bad. Okay. And that's going to be our USB controller heatsink. So this guy's pretty much ready to go now. I will flip him over and plug in my micro SD card. That's got the operating system on it. Good. And now I can install it in my case. So the orientation is pretty straightforward. You just make sure each of the ports lines up with the little holes in the case. This is probably going to be a similar process for any case you get, including ones that you get online or anything like that. You don't have to specifically 3D print a case, obviously. And now I'm going to take my fin. In this case, I've kind of knocked out this part because that's where my wires are going to go. And I've got a little bit of an extender on here. That's what these two things are for. Red one goes into the red one. Black one goes into the black one. Just like that. Awesome. Now I'm going to thread these through and connect them to the pins on the guide that it tells me to connect them on, specifically the 3.3 volts and the ground. That's what I'm interested in. So the red is going to go on the 3.3 volt channel like this. And then the ground is going to go 1, 2, 3 down like that. Outstanding. Now I will slip this case over. Put that down. Okay, just like that. And we are pretty much good to go. I'll just screw this guy in so to hold everything together. You know, this might be a good time for some Q&A because I have to do a little bit of screwing here. So let me know if you see any good questions in the chat. Also, by the way, shout out to Lowe's for only carrying like one size of metric screws. This is probably a US specific problem, but everything is imperial and my 3D printer assumes that I'm using metric. Any questions? No?
I love how Joe gets any shout out in the world he wants and he's shouting out to Lowe's.
Well, I usually try to, when it comes to building things, most of my shout outs are sarcastic.
There was a question about which specific Cana kit you bought. I think somebody answered it correctly. It's the Pi 4 8GB, right, Joe?
It is. So specifically, it's the Pi 4 8GB basic is the one that I got. And the basic comes with the heat sinks. It comes with the power supply. It comes with a nifty little switch for turning the thing on and off. And that's it. They offer a whole lot of different kits as far as different components. Some of them include like micro SD cards for you. Some of them include cases with fans. I did not go down that route though. I bought my own fan and printed my own case. The list on the guide website we has points to a pretty convenient one as a starting place that has a bunch of stuff in it. So I would start there and tweak it based on what you need.
You may have mentioned this, but there's another question. What's the rough total cost of the setup that you've got on your table there that you're working with?
Depending on the size of the SD card you get, so this thing is about twice as much, the 2 terabytes specifically, as the Pi itself. The website describes how much it is. Let me move over to that actually. Let me take a step back and go to the hardware section. There we go. This is what the rough cost is going to look like, depending on what size of SD card you get. So around 225 to 350. And then I didn't mention this in that guide, but if you want to throw a UPS onto it, that is going to cost something as well. You can do a traditional UPS that has a big old battery, big old lead acid battery, and plugs into things, or you can do the really bizarre thing that I'm about to do, and you can run the whole thing off of one of these like $40 power banks off Amazon. That works too. Okay, fan is connected. Looks good. Now I'll just screw in the case itself. And ironically, Lowe's did not have the correct size of screw for this. So I have to switch over to a hex bit. There we go. Those are the screws I'm going to be using. M3s by 0.5s. Anything else? I'm not looking at our Discord right now, so I can't see if people have any questions.
You're doing great.
Sure. Just want to, fill the air with. Normally, this is where like Unvedica's music comes into play, and it is jamming. Let me tell you, how many times I've watched like a State of the Stake or whatever, and I've got some Unvedica music in the background while we wait for things to start. So
I was going to say, Great Wizard's the one sitting in a studio right now. I feel like this is your time.
It's a fake background.
Can we do like a little Lowe's jingle? This is the Rocket Pool demo brought to you by Lowe's.
Yeah, Lowe's, if you're listening, carry more metric stuff, please. Thank you. All right.
Don't forget to find him at jcrtp.eth, Lowe's. Is that really your ENS? I made it up.
I don't have an ENS, and I feel like somebody's going to steal it and do something bad with it. What do I know? I should probably get on top of that at some point.
It's a little late now, buddy.
Yep. That's out of the bag. Oh, well. All right, one more. I mean, I probably don't even need to do this. This case really isn't going anywhere. It's solid, but my OCD is going to flip out if I have an unscrewed screw hole. In retrospect, I probably should have brought a drill for this instead of doing it by hand.
I just love that you're doing the hardware installation like live. I wouldn't do that.
Like I said,
if I were doing, I would have one like over in a secret drawer or something, and just sort of like pull it out and say like, here I am.
We'll talk about that. I may have something that will make you happy. All right, so here's going to be my fully operational validator running as a Pi. I'm going to do a little bit of cable management here just to make it slightly cleaner.
Quick question that I just saw.
Yep.
Do you have any concern about SSD fatigue?
No, not with a modern SSD. We don't write nearly enough to kill those things. I mean, if we do, it's a USB SSD. I can just get another one if need be. In my experience, though, the mean time between failure for modern SSDs is not going to be much of an issue for blockchain stuff. At least that's the hope. Talk to me in a year and a half or 2 years, and I'll let you know if I was wrong. Okay, a little bit of cable management on the side just to clean some stuff up, and we are good to go. So now I'll take this lovely little power button that CanaKit comes with. This is just a USB-C power button. it literally is just on off. That's all it does. Because normally the Pi has a USB-C port, and anytime you plug in some voltage to it, it just starts up immediately. It doesn't have an on-off switch. So I'll just leave that on. Okay, there we go. And now I'm going to do something a little non-traditional. Well, okay, let me open up the SD box first. As you can see, I don't know if you can tell or not, but this is still sealed, still got the tape on it. So proof that there is nothing up my sleeve. Okay. So again, if you're going to do this, I really, really recommend the T5. It's been great to me so far. I've run like 3 of them and haven't had any problems. The T7, ironically enough, does have problems. You would think it's better because it's newer, because it's got a bigger number on it, but it is not. The T5 is definitely the way to go. The T7 has issues with firmware, where most of the ones that ship, the firmware is atrocious for Pis and you have to update it. Oh, it comes with these cables too. So this is the one that we're going to use. This is a USB-C to big USB cable. And then this is a USB-C to USB-C cable. Actually, I can use this for this guy to power it. So I'll just do that. So here's my SSD. And here's my Pi. Give you guys a good shot of the angles on it. All right, let's plug it up. I love how small these things are. You'd expect it to be about SATA size, but it's not even close. It's like roughly the size of the Pi itself. The important thing that the guide is going to discuss, so let me go back to the preparing a Raspberry Pi guide here, and I'll scroll down. There we go. This is something that's very important that's bitten people before. The blue ports are the USB 3 ports. These are the fast ones. These are the ones that you want. The black ones are USB 2 ports. Those are for like keyboards and stuff that don't require a lot of speed. So you got a blue cable. You make sure it goes into the blue port. Otherwise, you're going to have speed problems. I've also got a handy dandy Ethernet cable here. So I'll plug that in too. And finally, I've got my power bank. This can go. So I will use the cable that came with the SSD and just plug that in straight away. So we're going to go USB-C to USB-C. Stay there. All right, moment of truth. Fan is spinning. I've got my little thing with some blue lights. This is going to indicate how much power is left. Spoiler alert, it's never going to change. It's never going to go below 75 because it takes like 10 hours to do that. I will see if I can stand up the SSD on its edge so you can watch that as well. You can see the little blinky light.
It takes 10 hours of runtime to go below 75%.
No, it takes 10 hours to kill the battery. So it lasts a really long time. You're like, for this stream, you're not going to see the thing change. Let me just try to finish this. This is terrible.
Yeah, because
can you see
my
the
server,
blinky light?
I get 8 minutes of runtime on my 3,000 watt backup battery. So,
well, you're going to save the world as soon as the beacon chain goes into non-finality fizz. So you got that going for you.
Joe, so your Pi isn't plugged into your mains at all? It's just in your battery right now?
Correct. It's literally on a cell phone battery because I got something to prove. Okay, so it's all connected and up and running. The next part, once you get to the operating system, so technically we're still here. We're still in the installing the operating system. You're supposed to do the SSD after you plug it up and you get everything ready to go and you've SSH'd into the operating system. I kind of skipped a step for the sake of time, but that's more or less the process of getting the operating system ready, using the image burner thing that I showed you, following the canonical guide. What I'm going to do now that I've plugged it in is I'm going to grab the IP address from it. And there are a couple ways of doing this. The way that I'm going to do it is off screen because I don't want to show everybody my internal network. Let's see.
Did you guys see that article on Hacker News? How you can use a microphone to detect keystrokes? It's pretty awesome.
I have not. Let's see.
Don't worry, everything's fine.
Everything's fine. Yeah. Okay, I see it. It looks like it is 25. No, nope, just disappeared. Let me let it come back. 25. Okay, so let me see if I can get a screenshot and scribble a bunch of stuff out for you so you can see what this looks like. This is going to be unique to everybody. It's based entirely on what router you use, but presumably you are comfortable with being able to get into your router and check out what's kind of running on your network. If you aren't comfortable with that, I encourage you to get comfortable if you're going to run a validator. It's going to be quite helpful. Let's see. Let's make this a little bit bigger. Okay, I'm going to try and block out everything except for the one that just showed up, or at least the one that I think just showed up. Good. Okay, and let me move this over, or I'll shrink it a little and then move it over. Okay, so this is a snapshot from my router configuration page that tells me what clients are where, and I just saw this guy pop up, 192.16.1.25. I think this is going to be correct, so I'm going to try SSHing into it. It has the name Ubuntu and nothing else on my network does, so I believe this is going to be good.
Did you just edit that in GIMP right now live?
Yeah.
That would have taken me 11 hours. Like, I swear. Like, sorry.
Okay. I don't judge.
Mad GIMP skills.
I don't judge out loud. It's fine. Good. So let's see. Now that I have installed the operating system, I've mounted the SSD, I'm making the fan run more quietly. The next thing I want to do is probably SSH into it and connect. I'm a little off script, like I said. But yeah, okay, this is the part where I'm going to SSH in. So let's do that here. I'm going to make a new terminal. Actually, let me see if I can do this. Outstanding. So this is going to be my SSH terminal. Or I could probably actually do this. We don't need the Pi view anymore. It's not going to change. I'll come back to that if I need to. But let me get some real estate back. Okay, and I should probably make this a bit larger so people can see. Let's see. Let's try size 12. Okay, can you guys read that okay?
Yep, looks
yes.
good.
What's
Not the
the
size
host name?
Mirne?
Yeah, I'm not familiar with it.
It's a Diablo 3 reference. Back when I used to be a gamer before, you know, I got a real life with a real job and stuff. Okay, let's start by trying to SSH into Ubuntu at 192.168.1.25. Okay, perfect. So this is an SSH host. It has Ubuntu as a name probably. I haven't connected to it before, which means it's new, which is good. So, oh, I can turn the camera back on now, by the way. Let's see. Sorry about that. Hi, guys. I've been here the whole time. I totally forgot about that. Yes, I would like to connect to this guy. It's going to ask me for the password. I believe the default password is just Ubuntu. And yes, it is. Outstanding. It's going to ask me to change the password again. So this is the first thing that happens with that preloaded image that we put onto the micro SD card. So I'll change that to something new. Or that's, oh, sorry, that was the old password. Let me try again. Okay, it wants me to put in the old password first. So I'll do that, and then the new one. Outstanding. Password's been updated. It's going to close. So now I try connecting again with the new password this time. And we're live. I am in. So if you haven't used SSH before, it's basically a way to remote into a terminal on another system. So this was a headless machine. Obviously, I should mention I haven't connected a keyboard to it. I haven't connected a mouse to it. I haven't run on a monitor or anything. I literally plugged it into the Ethernet and just waited for it to show up on my network. And that's really all you have to do. The Ubuntu guide will give you instructions on how to do that. So you don't have to like hook up a monitor to it or anything. But we are in. We are SSH'd in live. The first thing it's going to tell me is there's a system restart required. That's fine. So at the very beginning, I want to update the patches on this. I want to make sure it's up to date. And there are a couple of commands to do that. I'll explain which of these is. So first thing is sudo apt update. This is going to ping the Ubuntu servers and check all of my package versions against the latest and make sure that they're all good. This image just came out on Tuesday, so I hope that they're all good, but let's see if we have any updates for us. All packages are up to date. Perfect. So I don't have to do anything. It just complains that a restart is required. So let me do that real quick. I'll do a sudo reboot. It's going to turn my Pi off and let it restart. Actually, let me turn the PyCam on so you can see the blinky light. The SSD, if you can see this guy, it's going to have a real hard time standing up, but this light has turned off because when it restarts, it dismounts all of the USB hardware. So you know it's good. Let me see if I can just put a box on here. Oh yeah, that box is heavy because it still has the power supply in it because I'm not using it. I forgot. Okay. Oh, that's blinking again, so it looks good. So let me try doing my SSH command one more time. Get rid of this. Good. And we're live. No more restart required. We are all set. So that was installing the operating system for the Pi. Now there's a few little things we got to do to get this guy ready for validation. And this is where I'm just going to pretty much go through the guide and actually walk through each of these steps to see what to do. The first thing is we want to mount the SSD and get it ready for operation. So obviously the micro SD card is not going to be nearly big or fast enough to handle the chain data, which is why we have the 2 terabyte solid state. So we want to use the 2 terabyte solid state. So the first thing I'm going to do is figure out what the name of the disk is. It's going to scan through the hardware list and provide, okay, we've got a Samsung portable T5 and it is called /dev/SDA. And this is like 99% of the time, this is what it's going to be for your Pi if you're getting a Pi. If you are working with a different system, it'll probably be called /dev/SDB. Or if you're using like an NVMe drive, it'll be /dev/NVMe-N0 or something like that. But this command will show you what the device name for your SSD is. So I'm going to keep this dev SDA in mind. That's going to be useful later on when we start messing with it. Actually, it'll be useful right now. So the first thing we need to be able to do is create what's called a partition table. So by default, this doesn't have anything interesting on it. It's pretty much devoid of any interesting information, which means we can't use it. We have to set up a file system on it first. So that's what I'm going to do here. This long, complicated command, all this is going to do is it's going to essentially make what's called a partition table, which indexes like what portions of my solid state should be called what in the list of things and devices you can mount. So we'll do that. Good. And then we will do this part to flag the partition we just made with what's called an ext4 file system. For advanced users, you may want to change this to something like ZFS or BTRFS or insert your file system of choice here. That's totally fine. Since this is a beginner's guide, we're going to go with good old tried and true ext4. It takes just a little bit and we're done. Okay. And now this is, you don't have to do this, but I'm just going to label this thing the rocket drive so I know what it is. This basically just gives a human readable label to it. And now I want to confirm that all of that stuff was correct by running this command here, which is going to list all of the devices that are currently plugged in and installed on my Pi. All right, so I've got a system boot in this thing. This is the micro SD card, one of those partitions on the micro SD card. This is another partition on the micro SD card. And then down here, /dev/SDA1, notice there's a 1 at the end. This is important. I can see my rocket drive. Sweet. And then I've got this UUID here. I actually want to grab this, and the guide mentions that you want to grab this thing. You want to copy that and put it somewhere important because you're going to need it in a minute. So that's what I'll do here. Let me highlight this entire thing. I'll copy this, and I'll throw it into an editor. Let's see. That's probably fine. Let me just make it slightly bigger for you. I'm going to copy that into here, and we'll come back to that in a minute because I'm going to need it. The next thing is by default, this file system that we gave it, this ext4, is actually going to reserve a little bit of its space for critical system processes. So this way, it can't go completely dead and completely out of space to the point where you can't actually use it anymore. It's going to reserve a little bit. We want to turn that off because for the solid state, we don't care about that. At least I don't. You can skip this step if you prefer to have that as a safety buffer. But for my sake, the operating system is running on a different drive. It's running on the micro SD card, so I don't care about it for this. So I'll just turn that off. Outstanding, percent reserved to 0%. That's what I want to see. The next thing you want to do is make what's called a mount point. And so this is going to be a folder in your file system that we're going to use to say, anytime you write to a file in this folder, I actually want you to write to the SSD instead of the micro SD. So I'm going to start by making that folder. There it is in mount RP data. And now I'm going to mount the SSD onto there. So this mount command is going to say, anytime I write to this folder, what I mean is I really want to write to this guy. And this is the thing that just came out of our block ID up here. So I'll highlight it for you. That dev SDA1, this is what we want. So if yours is different, if yours isn't dev SDA1 here, replace this command with whatever it happens to be. In our case, it's the same thing. Good. Next thing is I want to make sure that this will preserve itself on a reboot. It will actually remount the solid state for me. And so I can do that here with this command. So this is actually going to open an editor, this thing called Nano here. This is a text editor that you use in the command line, just like this. I can navigate my little caret around and I can write some stuff. Just like that, for low. So what I want to copy now is this UUID that I just had, the thing that I told you to save before. We're going to copy that, and I'll get rid of the quotes. Say UUID equals, paste, and I'll do a tab, and this is the location you want to mount it to. So that's the name of the folder we just made. Then you're going to do another tab, and you're going to type in ext4 because that's the file system it's supposed to have, so it knows how to mount it. And then everything else I can just leave with defaults of 0, 0. So if you are another advanced user and you understand what this means, you may want to tweak it accordingly, like make this a 2 or something. That's totally fine. If you're an advanced user, you probably don't even need this part of the guide. But if you've never used this kind of stuff before, this is a quick, surefire way of making sure that your SSD will always be mounted to that folder when it restarts. Now I'm going to save it, and this shows you how to save with Nano down here. You press Control-O and then Enter to save. So I press Control-O, it asks me where I want to save it, and I say here. I press Enter, and then Control-X will make me exit. This Enter you don't need to do. The next thing we need to do is test out how fast the SSD is. And so for that, I'm going to grab this thing called FIO. I don't have it installed by default, so I'll have to install it, and that's what this is going to do for me. Yes, I would like to continue.
You're introducing utilities I'm not aware of. What does FIO do?
You're about to find out.
Ooh. Oh, is this like IOTop?
No, far from it.
Okay.
IOTop comes later. The reason that I do this is because I mentioned before, if you get a USB to SATA converter, some of them are a little flaky and they don't work with the Pi, and you want to see how fast your solid state disk is to confirm that it will be fast enough to run a validator. So before you get everything set up and start validating and then realize it's not fast enough, this is a surefire way to test it and make sure it will be fast enough for you. So now I'm going to go to that directory that I just made, mount RP data, where my thing is mounted. And I'm going to run this command. This is a really long command with a lot of stuff in it. So I'm just going to copy this whole thing and paste it in. So it's going to run FIO as the root user with a whole bunch of different arguments, but I'll let that run. And what this is going to do is it's going to create a 4 GB file, and it's going to do essentially a benchmark, a performance test that's going to try reading and writing. And it's going to tell me how fast the solid state is at both of those operations. So if my solid state is sufficiently fast enough, at the end of the day, it should look something like this. What we're looking for are read and write IOPS specifically, which is operations per second, or IO output operations per second. We want to read of about 15K, and we want to write about 5K. That's what we're looking for. If it's not this fast, it's maybe okay, but you want to start thinking about it. If it's way faster than this, like NVMe drives will get 80K here easily, which is way faster than the beacon chain actually needs for validation. But this is a great way to test your hardware to make sure it will work properly. Sorry,
I use DD to do this. This is incredible. I've never. DD is like the worst ever. I mean, but it's all I have for that. Like,
yeah,
testing
you can
read write times.
You can use. So that's the thing, is it will. Oh, what's this? Let's see. It's a little weird because my font size is big. Let me try making this bigger. Okay, that's what I want to see. My read speed is 16.8K and my write is 5609. And this is not speed. Let me highlight that. Fizz, what you're talking about with DD is speed. I'm not interested in speed. I'm interested in IOPS, which is how many of these read and writes it can do per second, which is much more important for validation. So I've got 16 and 56. This is actually the best SSD I've ever gotten from Samsung. So, I won the lottery, I suppose, but this is going to be just fine. These are the numbers that I want. Perfect. So we're good on that front. I can set up or skip the rest of this. The last thing it's going to ask me to do is remove that test file it just created. So if I take a look, I've got this lost and found directory, which doesn't matter. That's just a consequence of formatting it. I can ignore that. And then this test file I just made, which is really big. I think it's going to be like 4 gigabytes. Yeah, 4 gigs. So I can just remove that with this command here. So that'll clean up. Next thing I want to do is build some swap space. So swap space, if you're not familiar, is essentially you're using your solid state drive as emergency backup RAM if you run out of RAM. So it is not as fast as RAM, but it is fast enough to at least let your system survive so that you can do things and diagnose and see what's going on instead of just getting a pure out of memory exception and crashing to the ground. If you have a lot of RAM, like Fizz has 384 gigabytes or whatever, you don't need swap space. If you're running 32 gigs, you probably don't need swap space. If you're Gray Wizard and you have 64, you definitely don't need swap space. 8, you should have it. You really should have it. 16, you maybe can get away with not having it depending on what client you use. I recommend it for 16, but 32 and above, you probably don't need it. But what I'll do now is I'll make a file, and I'm going to make, let's do 8 gigabytes of swap space. I think that's okay. So I have 8 gigabytes of RAM. I'll make 8 gigabytes of swap space, and that should be good. So this is going to basically create a new file. It's 8 gigabytes large. I'll make some swap for it. And this is going to take a little while, not terribly long, but a little while. So now's a good time for some more Q&A. Let me take a look at our chat channel. I don't see anything new in there. It looks like it's all old stuff. I got a ping in the trading channel, which is to be expected. Are they crucifying me for my pronunciation again?
There were a few questions about can you run Rocket Pool on Mac or Windows? People were just kind of curious about the different operating systems.
Sure. You can run on Mac. We have even tried this with an M1 and it works. We still have some documentation up for that. It's a little bit different, the setup, but once you have it set up, then it's the same process actually running it as it is on a Linux machine. We don't support Windows right now, just because the kernel system is completely different. If that is a sufficiently requested feature, I'm sure we can take a look at where it would fit down the roadmap. But right now it is Mac and Linux only. All right, file's done. Outstanding. I'll set a couple of permissions on it. This is going to make it so only the root user can read and write to it. That's probably what I want. That way no one else can mess with my memory. This command is going to mark that file as swap space, so the operating system knows. And then this command here is going to enable it. It's going to turn it on. Okay. Now I have to add that to my mount table. So it's going to restart and automatically grab that swap space like I did before. So let me modify my table again. And this time I'm just going to do a straight copy paste of what's right here. I don't need to change anything. So this is going to do this swap file. There's a lot of space here, actually. Let me get rid of some of those. Oh, they're actual spaces. That's why. But that's okay. This is going to mount that file. It's going to say it is a swap volume and treat it accordingly, and just throw some of the defaults in there. This is fine. So all I really need to do is copy paste that line, save and exit with Control O and Enter, and then Control X, just like the guide says here. And now if I want to verify that I did it correctly, which is always a good idea, let me install a program called HTOP. It's already installed. Never mind. I don't have to do it. There must be something there. And if I run it, this is essentially kind of like a CLI version of the task manager. So this shows me what all 4 CPU cores are doing and how busy they are. And it shows me how much memory I'm using. Right now I'm using 209 megabytes out of my 8 gigs. Go Linux. And then at the bottom, the swap here says I have 8 gigs available. And I made my swap file 8 gigabytes. So that's expected. So I'll just press Q to exit that. And I'm just about done with the operating system. There's one more Pi specific thing I have to do, but I'll finish this off first here. The next thing I need to do is change what's called the swappiness and the cache pressure. And essentially what this means is Linux is really eager to use swap space if it's available. It really wants to use it even when it has absolutely no reason to use it. So we want to tell it to turn that off. And we only want it to use swap space when it's absolutely necessary in like emergency, I'm out of RAM situations. And that's what this setup over here will do, this couple of lines. So let me copy that line first and throw it in. Swappiness equals 6. This number goes from 0, which means turn swap off entirely, to 100, which means use it as much as possible. I find 6 to be a reasonable value to keep things working well without having to make too many concessions to your swap space. Your SSD really should just be used for beacon chain stuff and for ETH1 stuff, for execution flag stuff. I'll do this as well. And this is basically how frequently Linux is going to essentially refresh its cache of your file system, if you will. And I want to leave that one low. And then I'm just going to change this file, this etc/sysctl.conf. So nano again is an editor. I'm going to edit this file. I'm going to scroll all the way down to the bottom. And I'm just going to grab these 2 lines and throw them in here. And the reason I'm doing this is so that it persists on a reboot. This will make sure that the settings I just changed will be there after I reboot the Pi as well. Control O to save, enter, and Control X. That was a C, and we're done. So the last thing I have to do is Pi specific. Normally this, and I really recommend you take and pay close attention to this section. This is where we're going to overclock it. Normally you want to go in small increments, overclocking a little bit at a time and testing for stability to see how well it goes. Because we're already at the 2-hour mark, basically, I'm going to skip that and I'm just going to go straight to the end. So what I'm going to do here, let's see, is I'll start by going to my home directory and I'm going to install this thing called GCC. This is essentially a C compiler. It's going to take a little bit of time to install. It's got some dependencies on it. But what I want to test, and the reason that I want to build this, is there is some source code for a program called linpack that's publicly available. I'm going to download the source code. I'm going to compile it into a program for my Pi, and then I'm going to run it. And it's going to tell me how fast this thing is actually going. It's going to give me a benchmark, basically a point of comparison. That way, as I overclock, I can see that I'm actually getting performance improvements over time. Copy that, and as soon as this is done, I'll throw it in there. If you are interested in the source code, you can take a look at this link right here. This is the actual raw source code itself, and I encourage you to go explore. If you just want to run it to get some numbers, that's fine too. I'll paste that in. So that's been saved as linpack.c. So now I'm going to compile it. They don't offer pre-compiled binaries, unfortunately. All they offer is the source code, but it doesn't take very long to compile, as you saw. Now I'm going to move it into this folder, this user/local/bin. That way I can access it from anywhere just by running it. And then finally, I'm going to remove the source code file since I don't need it anymore. So let's try it out. Let's run it and see how it goes. Linpack. It's going to ask me what is the size of the array. I'm just going to leave it the blank, the default. Press enter, and we're going to let it run. Going to do a little bit of chugging as it goes through these repetitions, but the number that I want to take a look at is this K flops. This is thousands of floating point operations per second, and you don't have to know what that means. You just want the number because this is what you're going to compare as you overclock your Pi to make it go a little bit faster. This looks like a good middle of the road number. You can see there's kind of variation. Maybe this one's a little bit better. So I'm just going to take what I think is an average, and I'm going to copy that and throw it into here. We'll say stock. And that's 1500 megahertz. Good. I'm going to quit. I don't need that anymore. So this is basically going to be my stock settings. And this is usually the part where you want to go and test things out and make sure that they run you slowly want to ramp up your overclock over time, but for the sake of brevity, I'm just going to do this pretty quickly. I'm going to grab a couple of monitoring tools here. This is one, Raspberry Pi bin. Let's grab this guy. Obviously, if you're not on a Pi, you don't need Raspberry Pi bin. I'll install a couple more utilities here. One of them is called Stress, and one of them is called Python 3. So obviously, if you're Fizz and you're running with a 384 gigabyte machine, you can skip this part. That's okay.
I love how you quoted everyone by RAM size. Like you just listed like 8 people and the amount of memory they have. Like I'm imagining how you have people cataloged in your mind. That's James Carnley. He's got 128 gigs.
I catalog them by RAM size. That's exactly right.
Yeah.
I don't judge you until you tell me the size of your RAM, and then I start thinking about you in a different light. Exactly.
I think that's how it works.
Yep. Install this guy. Stressberry is actually a benchmarking utility, kind of like FIO, except instead of stressing your SSD, this is going to stress your CPU. And we're going to use this when we do the overclock to see how hot it's getting. I'm going to let this finish. That's fine. And then I'm actually just going to jump straight to the fully overclocked version, and we're going to see how it goes. And I'll turn this off and switch over to the power pack so you can see how much power it's actually pulling. So let's do that. What I'm going to do now is shut it down. Oh, actually, before I do that, let me change this file here. Blah, 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 stock settings. Okay. So in order to overclock the Pi, it's actually quite straightforward. You just edit this file /boot/firmware/userconfig.txt, and you want to change these numbers. 18 is what I would consider to be a mild overclock. It's fairly light. People can run with that just fine. I'm going to go ham, and I'm going to do 2100. So this is going to make my Pi, instead of running at the stock 1500 megahertz or 1.5 gigahertz, this is going to go to 2.1 gigahertz, which is a 40% speed increase. And I'm going to add 6 steps to the voltage curve. So I'm going to throw a lot more power at it. A lot more. We're talking like 1/10 of a watt, whatever. So I'll save that file, close it, and then I'm going to reboot. Actually, let me turn it off so that I can trade in for the power supply. Shut down, halt, and close it. Okay, and for this, let me move my old camera and go back to the Pi cam. So you can see what's going on here. So yeah, by the way, that was all done with this cell phone power brick here. Just as another shout out. It looks like this guy's off. So I'm going to press this little button, turn it off entirely, and you probably can't hear, but the fan has turned off. Disconnect my power bank. Don't need that anymore. And now let's open up the power supply. There we are. Don't forget to recycle your plastic bags, kids. Let's plug this guy in. I'll bring my kilowatt over so you can keep an eye on how much power it's drawing. Plug him in, keep my banana for scale. Oh, it's still cold. That's weird. Okay, we should be good. I got the blinky light up there. I'm going to press the power button. It's alive. Good. All right. Move my terminal over so we can see it. So I see my SSD is blinking. That's good. It means everything seems to be powered on correctly and properly. Let me try logging back into the machine. The big test. Okay, machine booted correctly, which means it's a stable overclock. That's pretty nice. Normally, when you're doing this process, you have to test each step of the overclocking to make sure that it boots correctly. And if it doesn't work, the guide has instructions on how to pull the micro SD card, plug it into your system, and fix it, essentially. But obviously, it booted correctly, and we're good. We can work from there. And the guide also has some instructions on how to do one of these tests, this benchmark test here. Let me show you what that would look like. So this is going to show me what the current temperature looks like. as it stresses my Pi out, you can watch the temperature curve kind of grow over time. And then this is what I can use to check my performance. So let me run the performance check real quick, just as a kind of point of comparison. I'll run linpack again. I'll leave it at the defaults. And as a reminder, the original number here was this, 1122373. That was the stock performance out of the gate. And now we are getting 1550454. Yeah, that first one looks like a pretty good middle of the road number. So we'll use that as a point of comparison. Let's just copy that. Okay, and we're done. So let me show you how much faster this is going. If I bring up a calculator and I do this guy minus this guy and then divide it by that number, we see we got a 38.1% increase in speed. That's not bad. We did a 40% overclock. We got 38% improvement. I'll take it. That's okay for me. Pretty good. Anyway, now that that's all working, let's see. I'm going to turn off the PyCam momentarily because we're not going to need it until a bit later. So this is effectively the entire part of setting up a Pi. After this, the operating system has been installed and set up, and the Pi specific portions are basically done. And after here, this is where you start getting into the actual like vanilla installing Rocket Pool and configuring it in node validation stuff. I recommend when you're doing the actual overclock, if you want to do this, run this command, this stress command. Let me show you what it actually looks like up here. Run this guy, and this will stress out your CPU, and so you can monitor its temperatures over time to see if you need to turn your fan up or if you're giving it too much voltage, if you need to back down your overclock because it's getting too hot or that kind of thing. I'm not going to bother with it for now because I don't think you guys need to see this thing run for like however long it takes. Just you're going to have to trust me that this overclock seems to be stable, so we're good. And we'll move on to the actual installing of Rocket Pool itself. There is some information in the installation section about the various ETH clients that we support, whether they are execution layer ETH1 clients or consensus layer ETH2 clients. What I'm going to do here is I'm going to run Geth as my client of choice for ETH1 for the execution layer, and I'm going to run Nimbus down here as my ETH2 client, my consensus layer client. Now, Nimbus has worked very hard to make sure that their system supports low power hardware like Raspberry Pis. They specifically mention Raspberry Pi in their label of their description of what it is. So this is what I'm going to work with. I've tried all of them in the past. I've had good luck with pretty much all of them, but Nimbus by far is the lowest on resource consumption. So that's what I'm going to stick to for this demo. But this section here has some more information about each of them. It's got a little bit of a comparison with respect to RAM usage and CPU usage and that kind of stuff. So when you're doing this, if you actually want to be a Rocket Pool node operator, I encourage you to take a good look at this section.
If I can make a plug,
Yes.
I acknowledge that I don't prefer to use Raspberry Pis, but I think it's great that you're using Nimbus, and I would encourage others to make the same choice. Simply from a network diversity perspective, with Nimbus having the lowest market share, if something does go wrong on the network, you have the best chance of surviving if it is a majority client, if you're running the minority client. So thank you for your service.
Especially if you have 384 gigabytes of RAM, you have a really good chance of surviving.
Is that all I am to you? Am I just RAM to you?
No, not just RAM, but okay.
But mostly RAM.
Mostly RAM, yeah. So I know we got a question earlier about how we support the diversity of the ETH2 ecosystem. When I install Rocket Pool, I'll show you this in more detail, but we begin by asking you, do you want to run a random client? And we will pick with an equal probability one of these clients for you and let you know what we chose, just in case you need to use that down the line. But if you go with the default configuration, Rocket Pool actually picks a random client. It doesn't, ask you which one you want to use, although you can certainly do that. It just says, do you want to run a random one? And you say yes. And then bam, you are automatically helping out the diversity of the ecosystem, unless by some crazy roll of the dice, literally everybody gets prisoned by doing that. Hopefully not. Okay, the next portion I want to highlight is this section here, selecting a rocket pool mode. There are 3 modes of operation for rocket pool. Oh, I should turn my main camera on. I forgot about that again. Sorry. Yes, hello. There are 3 main modes of rocket pool operation. We have the default mode, which is the most common mode. That's the one that we've worked very hard to optimize for the general user. And that is going to install the entire smart node stack using what's called Docker. Docker is basically a technology that lets you create this thing called a container that contains a binary and all the dependencies for that binary and all of the file system for that binary and that kind of stuff. But it's all wrapped up into this nice little box, this self-contained thing. And so you can pick it up and throw it away as you see fit without actually messing with your real file system or your real dependencies on your core OS or anything like that. So we're going to go with Docker for now. In real life, like for my actual node, what I do is I run what's called the native mode down here. And this is where I have complete control over everything. I don't use Docker at all. I set up my Geth client and my Nimbus client as services in my system. I install them locally and I manage all the dependencies myself. This gives me better performance than the Docker mode. It lets me optimize for the Pi much better. So if you are adventurous and you want to tackle that, you will definitely get better performance on a Pi specifically than the Docker mode. For regular hardware, this doesn't matter at all. The optimizations we're talking about are minuscule and you will never notice them. So for regular, how do you pronounce it? NUC hardware, I guess. Yeah, for that and for many PCs and conventional machines, if you are not super familiar with the CLI, go with the Docker setup. It is much, much easier to use. But if you are running at the extreme like I am, the native mode might be something to consider. And then we also have as a third option, this hybrid mode. And this is really useful for people who are already solo staking on the beacon chain. If you want to piggyback off of your existing ETH1 or ETH2 clients or both, and you just want Rocket Pool to talk to them instead of Rocket Pool standing up its own ETH1 and ETH2 stack. We've got this hybrid mode as well that lets you do exactly that. Rocket Pool will run its own little happy sandbox. You just tell it where your ETH1 and ETH2 clients are. It will connect to them. You can continue solo staking and running Rocket Pool on the same machine. No questions asked. So we support all of those modes of operation, and the installation guides for each of them are highlighted here in these various sections. So quickly, I'll go through the Docker one because that's what we're going to do. Okay, the first thing I need to do is make a bin folder inside my users directory. I'm already in the directory, so I can do that. And now I want to run this command here, although this is the wrong one. This is for x64 systems, which are regular computers. So if you're following along and you've got a NUC, it's going to take so long to get used to, and or like a VPS or anything like that, this is what you're going to want to do. Essentially, if you're on an ARM64 system, you're going to know you're on an ARM64 system. And so this is the one that you want. And if I take a look at the URL, it's almost exactly the same, except for this little prefix at the end. We have pre-compiled some Rocket Pool binaries for various architectures, and this is for the ARM one. So again, if you're on a Mac, normally you want to use this guy. If you're on an M1 Mac, that's an ARM system, you're going to want this guy. Actually, this is going to be Darwin instead of Linux. And you can see that if I click on this Mac OS section up here, the guide is kind of tabbed out so that you click on the relevant tab for your section. I'm on Linux, so I will grab this.
Who was responsible for developing these docs?
Me.
Dude, they're awesome.
Thanks.
Of course. Dave and Darren, he's a keeper, but I guess you know that. So
Oh yeah, we definitely know that. No, Joe's done an amazing job with these docs. Like he's really put in the time and effort. I mean, that's obvious right now. So.
Well, so
Yeah.
Full disclosure, the reason I wrote it to the level that I wrote it is because we get a lot of questions in the Discord chat about how do I do X, Y, and Z from people that aren't super familiar with Linux and aren't super familiar with the CLI. And I want to make them as comfortable as possible with the process. You know, if they've assumed the risk and the responsibility of being a staking as a service provider, I want to set them up for success. So I try very hard to make sure that these docs are something that anybody can follow, and each line explains what it's doing, essentially.
It's incredible. We've referred most people to Samara Sat's guide and CoinCashew's guide, but this one is, it's so high quality. Like I'm just very happy with it. Thank you.
Cheers. Happy to help. All right. Next up, I just downloaded my CLI. So the CLI is essentially your gateway into Rocket Pool. This is the command you're going to run anytime you want to do anything with Rocket Pool specifically. So now I'm going to do this thing called chmod plus X. And what this is going to let me do is mark it as an executable. So it's a binary. So my system is allowed to run it. I'll do that. And now in theory, I should mostly be good. I can try it out. Actually, let me do, I'm going to do this real quick. This isn't part of the guide, but this is part of the overclocking guide. I just haven't done it yet. Let me see if this works. Yes, it does. Okay. We've got version 100 RC7, and that is the latest. There will be an RC8 probably early next week because each of the beacon chain clients needs to update to get ready for the Altair hard fork on Praetor, and 2 of them haven't done that yet. So as soon as they update their versions, I can release a new version of the smart node stack with them in place, and life can continue on as expected. But for now, we're at RC7. Next thing I want to do, very simply, is Rocket Pool service install. And this is going to go onto our GitHub releases page, and it's going to grab all of the installation and configuration and service files that are necessary to start up the Docker stack. Am I sure I want to continue? Yes, I am very sure. So this is going to take a little while. And while this is going, let me move this over and turn the PyCam back on. We're using a solid 4 watts. All right. I don't know, man. It's a lot of power that we're burning here. Fun fact, I used to be a miner way back in the day. I had a rig with 13 1660 supers that I was mining with because I got them for very cheap before DeFi summer hit. And everything kind of caught fire. And that mining rig was pretty good. It did like 400 mega hashes per second, but it also consumed a kilowatt of power. And I really didn't like that. I'm a maximum efficiency kind of guy. So after doing some research and kind of exploring the proof of staking ecosystem, I decided it was more worth my time to sell that rig and instead invest in making Ethereum staking as efficient as humanly possible, which is the main reason I'm running it on a Pi at this point, is because this is using 5 watts of power, even though it hasn't started validating yet. And I can confirm that that's pretty comparable to what it actually uses when it's validating.
That is pretty impressive when you think even a high efficiency, like the newer light bulbs are like 12 watts.
Yeah.
What I'm
There you
hearing
go.
is Joe's love for Raspberry Pis is really just his guilt as being a former miner, then, is what I'm hearing.
You know, I've got a tone for my sins. What can I say?
I don't think I have former miner guilt. I don't know.
Yeah, cried your way
I am
all the way to
I
the
am
bank,
running
right?
like a tenth of the power now. So no, far less than a tenth. What am I even thinking? My
I would hope so.
I'm not running a single GPU. Like I'm not mining so at all. So I'm making up for it.
Done. All right. We're all finished and ready. If this is, so this is a note that I added in a recent version. If this is your first time installing Rocket Pool, please start a new shell session by logging out and back in. By and large, one of the most common issues that we've seen as far as troubleshooting goes in Rocket Pool is because it installs Docker and it adds you to Docker's permission list, so you can run Docker without sudo. In order for that permission to propagate, you have to start a new session. So people will try this and they'll get a whole bunch of failures about Docker and a bunch of error messages. And like, I look at the first 2 lines of that and I know exactly what went wrong. And so I just tell them like, restart your system and you'll be fine. And it works every time. So I'm actually going to exit this and I'm going to SSH back in. That way those permissions have propagated and I'm good to go. Okay, let me kill the PyCam again. And we'll move this over. Good. Smart node stack has been installed. We don't have to worry about any of this stuff. That's just if it fails because you're on an unsupported operating system. The next thing I want to do is change where Docker is going to store my information. Most of the time, you're going to have like a 2 terabyte solid state and your operating system is installed on that solid state and you don't have to worry about this step. This is only if you want Docker to run on a different disk than your operating system is installed on. which is obviously the case for us because our operating system is on a micro SD card and we want to use the solid state for all the Rocket Pool good stuff. So I'm going to copy this and I'm going to create a file, etc/docker/daemon.json, the contents of which are just going to be straight copy pasted in here. But I'm going to change this your external mount point to the directory mount/rp data that I know my solid state is mounted to. And this is what I got earlier from the Raspberry Pi setup. We put the SSD here. Okay, and just to confirm, I can show you that. I'll do sudo, actually, I don't even need that. F-h. Good. So this is a list of all the file systems and partitions on my machine. In here, I can see /dev/sda1 has 1.8 terabytes. Well, that's its total size. It basically has that much free. It's got 8 gigs used and it's mounted to this. So I know this is the correct one. Good. So I've set that. Next, I need to make a Docker directory there. So we'll do sudo maker. That should have a sudo in it. It doesn't, and I should probably fix that. p/mount/rpdata/docker. So this is the folder that I just told Docker I wanted to run inside of. And then the last part is I want to restart the Docker process, the Docker service, so that it gets the information about that change. Now it's going to start using that. So if I take a look inside there, hopefully I'll see something. I don't know if it will or not because I haven't actually started any containers yet, but we'll check anyway. Oh yeah, take a look. Build kit, containers, image, network, overlay 2 plugins. So it's definitely got the change. It's writing a whole bunch of stuff to that directory. So we're good. Docker has been installed on the SSD, and this will survive for the entirety of my system's life. Any Rocket Pool updates or anything like that are not going to overwrite this change. So we're good there. We're effectively done. The next part I have to do is configure the smart node stack. And that can be done with this command here, Rocket Pool service config. And this is the main interview. So anytime you want to change Rocket Pool's configuration, this is usually where you're going to do it. Anything that you leave alone will try to remain what it was before, but any setting that you change here will propagate out and kind of recover every time you restart Rocket Pool. It'll start with those new settings. So most of the time you only run this once unless you want to tweak something if you're experimenting. But I'll run this once for the first time. Let me make this a little bit bigger here. Good. So it'll first ask us which ETH1 client we would like to run. I'm going to use Geth. ETHstats label, I'm going to ignore and leave that blank. ETHstats login, ignore and leave that blank as well. It's going to ask me about the cache size, and this knows that I'm on an ARM system, so the default here is actually a little different than most systems. By default, with an x64 system, it's going to do 1024 megabytes of cache for Geth, which is basically how much RAM Geth is allowed to use. You can think of it like that, or how much extra RAM Geth is allowed to use. For an ARM system,
that's coded in. That's awesome that it's pre-configured.
It knows. So it assumes if you're on an ARM system, you're on low power, and so it sets a lower Geth cache for you, basically. It says set this to 256 if you've got 4 gigs, or 512 if you have 8. The default is 256. I've got 8, so I'm going to do 512 here. Good. Number of peers. This is going to be lowered for ARM systems as well. This will strain your CPU and your network stack a little bit less than if you have the normal 50 peers that x64 systems use. I'll go with 12 by default for now. That's okay. So I'll leave that and just press enter. And then the peer-to-peer port for Geth traffic. You can change this as well if you would like. If you have something already running on this port, perhaps you want to change that, but I'll leave that the same too. Good. And then the next question is, would you like to run a random ETH2 client? And so this is where the diversity comes into play. If you say yes to this, then we will automatically pick a random one of those 4 clients that I listed before: Lighthouse, Nimbus, Prism, and Teku. We will pick between one of those 4 randomly and assign it to you. That way you are inadvertently contributing to the health of the beacon chain just by picking a random client, by picking something that is less represented overall.
So can I gloat on you for a minute?
Yeah, go ahead.
Joe's first contribution to Rocket Pool was submitting pull requests to all 3 of the launch clients because it was originally only Prism. And he responded to the call to increase client diversity by adding the other 3 clients. He did that, I believe, totally single-handedly. I don't know. Yeah. Did you get help? And so,
well, that's not fair. I asked Jake about how the Rocket Pool stack works a lot as I was learning its API. So how do you pronounce Jake's last name? Yeah. Sorry.
I say popsicle in my head, but
Yeah,
It's
no
Pop
disrespect
Shelly.
intended. What is it?
Pop
What
Shelly.
is it?
Pop
Shelly.
Shelly.
Okay.
I'm not even
Yeah.
close, man. I'm just
Better
gonna
than
shut
me
up.
Yeah.
saying popsicle. It just at any rate, Joe is responsible for getting client diversity as a priority in Rocket Pool. And again, that is another reason that EthStaker is so ready and willing to engage. So thanks for that.
Well, I wanted to do it because of Nimbus, because Nimbus promised me that number would be really low. So that's pretty much why I started doing it. And then I kind of fell in love with the project after I learned about how it works.
Does it remain 3 watts if you move the banana away?
Let's find out.
What? Okay,
Yep.
you have to put it back now. We have to
Okay.
watch it.
Very good. All right. Anyway, I'm going to say no. I do not want to run a random ETH2 client. And then it's going to list all of the 4 that it supports. And I'm going to pick Nimbus from my option by pressing 2. It's going to ask me for graffiti. So every time you propose a block on the beacon chain, you have the option of including a little blurb, a little excerpt, a little bit of text, and it can be pretty much whatever you want. So I'm going to say made on a Pi. Yay, or maybe on a Pi 4. Oh, Freddie can't do that. Sorry. Pi 4. Okay. The max number of peers. Normally Nimbus wants to run at 180 peers. It's very chatty. I'm going to leave it at 50 because again, it knows that we're on an ARM system on a Raspberry Pi with low resources. So I've toned down the max number of peers for that case. I'll just leave it as 50 and call it a day. It's going to ask me about the peer-to-peer ports, and I'm just going to leave that as the default as well. And then this is something new with RC6 that we added a week or so ago. It's going to ask if you want to enable the metrics dashboard. And I want to say, yes, I would love to enable the metrics dashboard. That sounds great. What ports do you want? And I'll skip over this. Basically, it's going to ask me a bunch of different port-related questions. I'm going to leave them all as default. But if you want to change any of your ports, you can pick them here. So metrics port is fine. Validator port is fine. Rocket Pool node metrics port is fine. Node exporter is fine, and Prometheus is fine. I'll leave them all as the defaults, and Grafana. Although this one is important to remember, the 3100 here. Prometheus and Grafana are both kind of important, and we'll get to that in a second. Done. Please run Rocket Pool service stop and Rocket Pool service start to apply any changes you made. I already did a stop because I haven't started it yet, so all I need to do now is Rocket Pool service start. And this is going to launch all of the Docker containers and set up all of the networking and deal with all of the ports and all of the configuration and literally everything you need to do to run a full Ethereum 1 and 2 node with that simple command. And as soon as that's finished, we're good. So we'll just let that plug and chug for a second, and I can actually move this over and show the PyCam again, and we can take a look at its wattage. Whoops, wrong button. There we go. Now, as this starts doing things, you're going to see this SSD light is basically going to start blinking, and it's not going to stop because it's doing beacon chainy stuff and Geth stuff.
Bro, you're burning 7 watts.
Is the
That's,
banana still cold? I would classify this as cool. I wouldn't call it cold.
That 7 watts. That's a major drain going on there.
Oh, I'm
I
up
don't
to
know how
8.
you
9. Woo! We're cruising
I don't-
now.
I don't know how you sleep at night.
Yeah, really. I'm back down to 4, and we're done here. So, oh,
You know,
I'm-
this is one of Vitalik's original promises about, or well, one of his original expectations or design specs for the beacon chain was that it would be able to run on very light hardware. And I have personally had trouble really reconciling that, but you're
let's just
doing
say
it. You're
I
making it
didn't,
real.
I didn't take him at his word. I'm trying it out for real. But okay.
Apparently he was right, and you made him right.
He was right. Yeah. Oh, we're actually pulling a fair bit as it starts loading things. We're up to 8 now. I think we were at 9 before.
I guess Nimbus helped a little bit, didn't they?
Yes, and I've actually worked fairly closely with them to make this work properly as I've integrated it into Rocket Pool. But let's take so we'll do a couple of quick status things, and then I've got a secret for you guys. Very first thing is, and the guide will cover all of this, but I think we're kind of past the part of the guide now. I'll come back to it in a second when we get to Grafana. But for the first thing, now that it's up and running, is I want to check on the status of everything to make sure it's good. So there's a couple ways of doing that. The one that I'm going to do here is Rocket Pool service status. This is going to query Docker and check all of the containers that it's using. Let me see if I can make this a little bit cleaner. Yeah, that looks okay. Let me just get rid of the PyCam. Perfect. What you want to see is the state is up for all of them. So Rocket Pool API, up, good. ETH2, ETH1, that's our Geth, up, good. We can see all the ports that we listed here. ETH2, up, that's Nimbus, good. Exporter and Grafana are metricsy things that I'll show off in a second. The node, up. Prometheus, up. Validator, everything is up and live. We are good to go. Next thing I want to do is perhaps take a look at the logs for my ETH1 and ETH2. I can do that with Rocket Pool service logs. We'll do ETH1. So this will actually show me Geth's output. And you can see it's importing things now. It is doing what Geth usually does. It's running things. It's syncing with the chain. As a reminder, this is not mainnet. This is Goerli. This is one of the test networks. But we can see it working. It says it's going to be done syncing in about 35 minutes. I don't know if that's true. It's pretty good though. I know SnapSync is impressive. I don't know if it's that impressive. I'm syncing things from 2 years and 6 months ago, which is about when Goerli started. I can also take a look at Nimbus with ETH2 here in my logs. Okay, it looks like Nimbus is syncing along happily as well. I see slot start and slot end. That's Nimbus code for we are correctly syncing the network and things. There should be an ETA down here. Okay, it's going to take 9 days. It's going to take 8 days. It might take a little bit less than that. It looks like the ETA is kind of dropping down as it goes. The Nimbus logs are a little bit arcane to decipher, but this number right here is how long until the chain is finished syncing. 8 days, 5 hours.
I feel like we could probably answer community questions for the next 7 days, just to, just to improve that whole coherence kind of thing.
Maybe. Well, what I want to show that basically I just wanted to show the logs to indicate of how a node user would check to see if everything is up and running and correct. What you can do basically once your node is finished syncing, you can do this command here. I'll init. I don't know if this will actually work. Okay, it will. Actually, now that I think about it, I should probably move this off screen because it's about to show me my new mnemonic. Yep. So that command, that Rocket Pool wallet inits, is going to essentially create a new ETH1 address for me, just like making a new account in MetaMask would be. It's going to give me my mnemonic for that account. I have to write it down somewhere, not on a computer, hopefully, so that nobody can hack it, and then verify that I wrote it down correctly. And when I'm done, it's going to give me the address for my new node wallet. I can take this address and I can use it in the Rocket Pool kind of ecosystem, essentially. This is the account for my node. And so this is the address if I want to send Ether to or RPL or whatever to, this is where I will send it. Essentially my computer now owns this address. This is my Rocket Pool address, which is an ETH1 address. It's gonna, before you actually do the next couple of steps, it's going to have to sync the ETH1 and the ETH2 chains, and that's going to take like 8 days, like Fizz said. So I'm actually going to stop here. Let me shut this thing down entirely. Shut down. Oh, you know what? Before I do that, let me show off Grafana real quick. This is 1.25.
The community would like to lodge a formal complaint that we call it pseudo. I think we may have addressed this once before.
Oh, not again.
Yeah, I know, man. No, well, so actually Sam is keeping a list. And we're going to talk about them after the program.
You're telling it to do something. It's sudo, like su switch user do this thing.
Hey, buddy, you know I got to
argue with me all you want, but I know I'm right on this one.
I'm not arguing. I respect your position.
Okay. Anyway, what I want to show real quick is this. If I go to the address of my staker, which is 1.25, port 3100 was the port for Grafana.
Wait, how did you say PORT? How did you pronounce that?
Oh, God.
I'm just teasing.
That's all the time we have, everybody. Thanks for coming. We'll check you next time. Yeah. Looks like that one's not open. Oh, you know what? I think this might be a firewall problem. Okay, let me kill this real quick. I'm just going to shut this entire thing down, and I'll pull out the other one out of the oven. Okay. So
you are performing incredibly well. So many tasks. I'm very impressed with your agility here.
Done this like 1,000 times now because every time I rebuild features, I have to do this to make sure that they'll work. Anyway, let me turn the PyCam back on. Okay, we're using 2 watts, which basically means it's dead. The SSD light is no longer on, which is good. Let me turn this camera off. So essentially, this is the part where you let this machine run and sync with the whatever chains you happen to be using. In our case, it's Prater and Goerli. We're not going to do that here because, like Fizz says, it's going to take 8 days. So what I would like to point your attention to is this is getting in the way. I've got over here inside my toaster oven, maybe you can kind of see that. I've got one that we prepared earlier. We've got a fresh baked pie.
This has something to do with owls, doesn't it?
This is all Owl's fault.
Did he pressure you to this?
If you want to complain about this dad joke, his name was Looking for Owls. I think it's Owlbear now on the Discord. But yes, we've got a fresh baked pie. Oh, let me move the camera back down.
I think he pressured you.
That came straight out of the oven, ready to go. Or at least it was ready to go a couple hours ago. It's probably going to need a little bit to sync now. But I can unplug this guy. With his solid state on. Now I can plug this guy back in. There we are. And so this is one of the nice things about a pie, is the pie itself is like 80 bucks. So if it dies for any reason, then you just throw it away and you get a new one. Nobody cares. The solid state is fine. Well, presumably if your system dies, the solid state will still be fine. And you can just throw your pie away and get another one. It's also really cheap for testing out on our test network. So I should mention that our test network is going to stay around until pretty much forever. It's going to stay around after the mainnet, and that way you can go on there and try Rocket Pool's stack out without risking any of your actual ether doing this whole process. You can try it out for free, essentially, to make sure you're comfortable with the steps involved and your system is going to work and your ISP is not going to kill you for taking too much bandwidth and that kind of thing. You can do all that on the Prater test network that we have. It's going to live in parallel with the mainnet. Anyway, now that that thing is loading, I'm going to try SSHing into him. I believe his address is 240. Yes, it is. Okay, outstanding. And what I can do now is take a look at some of those commands that I ran before. Rocket Pool service logs ETH1. Can take a look at Geth's logs and see how far behind it is. It's a couple hours.
So just
Okay,
to bring everybody like up to date, we've spent the past while installing and getting Rocket Pool up and running from scratch. So if you've decided you want to use a Raspberry Pi, you can follow all of those instructions. And now we're kind of shifting gears. We have a Raspberry Pi that is fully synced, and we're going to do some other demos. The thing that I'm most excited about seeing in this demo is...
Yeah, so let's get to that. Well, this is running. Because we've been going for so long, I will skip through this real quickly. I'll say coming down to here, once you have done the whole process of starting a Rocket Pool, syncing everything, getting used to the command line interface, creating a mini pool, setting your withdrawal address, like this whole guide will go through all of that stuff. But we've probably taken enough of your time, so I'll skip a little bit towards the end. If you are interested in running on our test network to try all of that stuff out, please read through that portion of the guide. And it'll walk you through every step of the process and be just as comprehensive as everything you've seen so far. But what I'll show here, assuming you have a validator up and running and are ready to go, there is a portion here called monitoring your node's performance, and then a new one called setting up the Grafana dashboard. And that's what we want to talk about next. There are a couple of instructions here that you can follow on how to essentially get this dashboard that I showed earlier. And I'll go over what that dashboard is specifically so you can see what it looks like as we're doing some things. Let me move that over now. This will show you how to set it all up, same as we've done before. But I think it's more important that we actually show you the dashboard itself and talk about some of its features, some of its quirks and features, perhaps. So this is, in a nutshell, what you will get out of the box when you are synced and your validators are running and you are ready to go. What I will remind you is this is my mainnet machine. So this is running a Prater version of Nimbus, but it's running a mainnet version of Geth. So the stress on the hardware should be accurate to what you'll actually see on mainnet. Noticeably, it's using about 4.5 gigabytes of RAM in total. 1.3 comes from Nimbus. This node is actually slightly busier than a normal Rocket Pool node would be, because this is what's called an Oracle node. Essentially, this Pi is acting as a way to monitor the beacon chain's status, like whether or not you're slashed and what your balance is, and report that back to the smart contracts on ETH1. And it does that about once an hour. But those operations are heavy. They do a lot of things. So it is definitely important to make sure that this system is performant in that capacity. Let's see. Okay, actually, let me get rid of the Pi cam here. I didn't realize that was still on. There we go. Now we're looking good. Okay, so I'll point out a couple of things about this dashboard, because this is kind of going to be your bread and butter when it comes to watching your validator and making sure it's running correctly and it's doing its job. It's earning you Ether on the beacon chain. It's validating. It's helping secure the network and that kind of stuff. We've kind of broken it up into 4 sections. There's a hardware section over here on the top left. There's a section on your validator's stats on the top right. And so this is basically telling you what your beacon chain or your beacon client is reporting as far as how it thinks its performance is. If I scroll down a little bit on the bottom left, there's this portion which shows stats about the Rocket Pool network as a whole. So this is the total amount of Ether that's locked on the network. This is how much RPL has been staked. And to learn more about what RPL is, why you need it, what it's for, how you stake it, please either take a look at those guides or ask us on the Discord. Please come in and ask us a couple of questions about this process. We're all happy to answer. It tells you what the RETH price is in terms of Ether. So I mentioned RETH is a pool staking token before. This tells you what that price is. It tells you the price of RPL, how much Ether is in the staking pool and how much is being used right now, how many nodes there are, how many mini pools there are, because you can have multiple mini pools per node, and a mini pool is essentially a ETH2 validator. And so here we can clearly see it looks like most people are running 2 mini pools. We can see what the status of each of them is and what the current commission rate is. So if you were to make a mini pool right now, this is how much of a commission you would be given for all of the rewards you earn on the beacon chain. And that comes into play as well over here. On this middle right portion, we can see the total value in Ether for all of my validators on the beacon chain. I've got 2 validators running, and collectively they have 64.12 Ether on them. This is how much of that total balance belongs to me, the node operator. So it's not just cut in half, it's cut in half and my commission is included in it as well. We can watch our earnings go up over time. Right now I've got this whole thing set to a 1-hour time span. So I'm basically the start and finish of my graph are a single hour, and I can watch it slowly kind of stair step as I do attestations. And then this is one thing that I'm particularly proud of. This shows me what the APR would be if I were a solo staker. And then this shows me what the APR of my balance is as a Rocket Pool node operator. So this includes my commission on those validators that are on the beacon chain. I get all of the rewards plus a commission. And so this number here is pretty much always going to be higher than this number. So technically it is more attractive to run a Rocket Pool node than a solo staking node from a economic standpoint. And then at the bottom here, this shows you your RPL rewards. And I haven't talked a whole lot about RPL. Effectively, it is used as insurance to make sure that if you do something terribly wrong, the 16 Ether that the node operators put up is going to be preserved. It will always be there, and it can't go any lower than that, since you are a staking as a service provider at this point. This shows me basically as a portion of doing that, you are rewarded every so often. I think on mainnet it'll be every 28 days. You're rewarded in discrete intervals for your service with our token, with the RPL token. And the APR on it is pretty high right now. It's like 230% or something. And this is really just a function of this number here, which is how much RPL has been staked across the entire network. We essentially cap your earnings rather at 150% of your node's value in Ether. So for example, if you stake a single mini pool and you put up 16 Ether of your own, and then you put up 24 Ether worth of RPL as collateral, that would be 150% collateral rate. That's what this number here is, this RPL collateral. And so you would
for anyone who cares,
for that.
I like to think of a fully stocked validator as 40 ETH. It's just an easy rule of thumb.
provisionally. You have the option of going all the way down to 10%. So if you put up 16 Ether, you can put up 1.6 Ether worth of RPL as well. You can do that. Or you can go up to 150, or you can do any number in between. And so for this, I've done 15% for my 2 validators. I've got this much RPL staked. This is how much RPL I'm expecting to get as a reward, and the rewards happen every 3 days. The next one's coming up August 30th in 2 days. And so this lets me keep an eye on that. And if for some reason I have any unclaimed rewards, like if my node is broken or something like that, the dashboard will yell at me in bright red, and it'll say, hey, you've got unclaimed rewards, go get them. The RPL collateral has a range where the red is anything below 10%, because if you fall below 10%, it means you can no longer claim those rewards. You can still earn them, you just can't claim them until you top back up to 10% or the price moves to get you there. And correspondingly, it caps out at 150, because you have any stake over 150, you just don't get any earnings on that portion of it. You only get earnings for the first 150%. I know I was asked before to go over some of these metrics as well, so I'll try to cover some of the hardware stuff in detail, and so you can see what the Pi is actually doing. Let me see how it is, by the way. Let's take a look. It's running at 5 watts right now. Camera's a little bit off. Yeah, 4 watts, 5 watts, and this is basically doing the same thing as the machine that this Grafana represents. So 5 is representative of what you would expect, 5 or 6 probably, for actually running on the main network. Oh, now it's up to 7, God forbid. But okay, so this first thing that I want to highlight is, as a staking as a service provider, you're responsible for patching your machine. And so these here, the reboot needed and the available updates, will hook into your operating system and will tell you when you are ready for patches, when you've got things you need to apply, when you're out of date, and that kind of stuff. So it's a good, looking at this dashboard is a good way of checking whether or not you are up to date, or whether or not you need to patch your machine and maintenance is required. We also have an update here for Rocket Pool as well. So this will tell you if there's a new Rocket Pool version, and it does this by checking to see what version you're currently running and what version is currently latest on GitHub, and comparing the two. And if you're out of date, it'll yell at you. I mentioned swap space at the whole beginning of this process. This will watch the swap space and tell you how much you're using. That swappiness trick we did by setting the number all the way down to 6 helped a lot. So I'm only using half of my RAM right now. I've got just under 8 gigabytes total. I'm using 4.5, but I'm still barely scratching my swap space, which is exactly what I want to see. It'll keep my RAM nice and fast. Nimbus is using 1.3 gigabytes, which is actually a lot for Nimbus. Most of the time this hangs out in the 800 megabyte range, give or take. It's only this high because of those, I mentioned the extra Oracle node duties, where I query the beacon chain regularly to report the balance on the beacon chain back to the Rocket Pool smart contracts. That querying does hit the RAM a little bit, so this number does go up a bit. And then we can see what the CPU metrics look like. Nimbus is using pretty much a single core. So the Pi has 4 cores, 25% total per core, and Nimbus is using 23.9. So on the CPU usage graph, I've got a little yellow line that shows you what a single core is for your threshold. And I can see Nimbus is pretty much bumping into that. So it's basically capped at its CPU capacity. Nimbus is running as hard as it can with that single thread. And then the rest of my system looks like it's Geth. I'm using CPU usage. It's not 100% by any means. So the Pi still has room to spare, but it is up there. I mean, we're looking at like the 65 to 70% range. But my CPU is a nice balmy 45 degrees, which is excellent. This is really a good number for CPU temperature. Anything above 65, I start to get a little leery, but that's just a personal threshold for me. You can sort of, at 85, the Pi gets too hot and it starts to downclock itself. It'll actually undo your overclock and start to throttle itself to make sure it doesn't get too hot. But 46, we've got room to spare. These two things here will show you how much space you have left on your operating system disk, and optionally, if you run on a second disk, how much space you have on that second disk as well. So that's what we do. We run the beacon chain stuff and the ETH1 chain on a SSD, a second disk. So I like keeping tabs on that. Anytime you get into the yellow line, you're running a little low on space, and you should really think about cleaning it up. We have a guide on our websites that shows you how to do what's called pruning, which is basically where you take the Geth state and sometimes the beacon state, and you turn your client off and kind of compactify and squish the database and get rid of all the stuff that you don't need anymore. Sort of like emptying the recycle bin, if you will. These charts here, the IO wait time and the SSD latency, those are really just for your own reference. So you can see if there are any major spikes over time. You can look at these to kind of report the regular numbers if you are interested. That might be helpful for you. But most of the time, I personally use these to diagnose any weird problems my system might be having where, say, there is some rogue errant process that's eating up all of my SSD's IO, like all the read and write cycles it can actually do. And that'll help me figure out when it started so I can track down what it is. But for the most part, you don't really see a whole lot of detail with these except for the occasional spike. So each of these spikes you see in the IO wait time and the corresponding CPU spikes, I believe those are finality checkpoints on the beacon chain. That's when you hit a new finalization step and Nimbus has to do a little bit of extra number crunching to get its state sort of in a good spot for everyone else. And then the network usage is just something you can keep tabs on as far as like, I like this network IO because it tells me exactly how much bandwidth I should expect to need per month. And there are some other ways in the guides as well that show you how to check those numbers. So you can tell if you're getting close to your ISP's data cap or not, or anything like that. And up here, we just have some metrics reported from Nimbus itself. Tells me how many attestations I've done since I restarted it, when the next one's gonna be. It tells me how many I've done basically here so I can watch them over time, and then what the delay is. And so this tells me essentially how long it took for my Pi to get one of the proposed blocks, confirm it was good, and send my confirmation out to the rest of the beacon chain on that peer-to-peer port. Anything under, like anything -4 to 0 for Nimbus is really good. That means you've sent it with plenty of time to spare and you're all set. Anything like 4 seconds and over, this is when you start running into those inclusion distance problems where you start getting your pay docked a little bit because you took too long to send it. But this guy, even though he's running a mainnet geth, looks like most of his are hanging out in like the 1 range, give or take, which is again, plenty of time to spare, no problem. So if I open up that validator page again, I open it here and I'll refresh it. Oh, that's the wrong refresh. Here we go. Yeah, still 95. So nothing's really changed on that front. Still doing just fine. Optimal inclusion distance, most of these are going to be 0. And because it's Praetor, you're never going to get 100. I mean, Praetor just by design, the fact that it only has what, 70% participation right now. Let's take a look. Okay, so it's at 73. It's a little bit better now, but a lot of the validators are offline. And so sometimes you're just inherently going to have a little bit longer distance as a factor of that. That's okay. So as long as that number there is in like the mid to high 90s, I would consider this to be fine. No problems. But yeah, basically you get this dashboard for free. We have one for each ETH2 client because they all report slightly different metrics. This is the one for Nimbus. But most of the stuff is going to be the same. The only real difference is the stuff up here in this top right corner. And that is how you kind of keep tabs on your hardware and on your validator and on your total beacon balance and the network itself. And you can see all of this at a glance. We show you how to import this thing, how to stand up Grafana in our documentation. All of that stuff is relevant and good to go. It's in that same sort of easy to follow step-by-step breakdown that you've been through throughout the rest of the guide so far. So yeah, I think that's pretty good. Fizz, any questions about this? Should we start fielding some Q&A?
Yeah, I think it's a good time to knock out a couple questions. Sam, do you want to go over the word pronunciation list with us? Is that where we're going to start? Okay, I'm done. That was my last one.
Yeah.
Sorry. Okay, maybe I need one more later, but after that, I'm going to be done for real.
Okay.
I've been monitoring the questions pretty carefully, and we haven't had any legitimate ones in quite a while. So if people have legitimate questions for the team here, please throw them into the chat on Discord or on YouTube, and we'll get to them.
Your explanations have been extremely thorough. I think kind of what I see about questions, they are generally larger scope, like when, and I don't blame people for that. I mean, I ask it kiddingly, but you know, honestly, people, it's an honest question that people have that there just isn't a fair answer for right now. Unless Dave wants.
that's conveniently enough why I brought Dave and Legis, because I'm a technical guy. I can answer any questions about the implementation details, but when it comes to businessy stuff, that's all them.
Yeah, but it's shaping up very nicely. That's all I got to say for now.
Yeah, I was sorry. But Joe, your overview is incredible. I think anybody who has an interest in staking with a Raspberry Pi, getting started on Prater and just verifying that they can do it, that it does work, that your instructions are just so straightforward, and that the community on Discord is always staffed with people, excluding looking for owls, who are willing to give honest and helpful feedback to help users get up and running. So yeah, I think it's awesome. And this dashboard is, I said it on Twitter, but I really meant it. When I talk about Rocket Pool with people, they're like, yeah, but what about metrics? And I think this it did more than hit the nail on the head. It knocked it out of the park. So yeah, this is
the
great.
only metric I lament that I can't get that I wish I could is that one, because at the end of the day, that's the most important one to me. So I got to keep an eye on my kilowatt for it. But everything else is there.
Do you know what you could do? You could use a Raspberry Pi camera add-on with some OCR, and then it could really just quantify that as a number that you could express on the screen. I don't think it's too difficult.
I'll
right,
see if I
just
can
kidding.
fit that in for mainnet.
Don't
Yeah,
do that.
sounds good.
Please don't do that.
Okay.
No, please do not do that.
Here's the one that we started, or the one that we got out of the oven. Obviously, Nimbus is syncing just fine. My ISP is going to hate me. I've got 5 Pis running. Each of them is syncing Ethereum.
If a Pi can saturate your network, then yeah. Hey, a legit question. What about notification for updates? Either now when we're getting new release candidates on mainnet.
I'm glad you ask. We actually, okay, so notification for updates. What we are working on right now, when I talked about integration, the fact that we are all on the Ethereum chain, so anybody can read our state or anything. One of the things we can do is take advantage of this partnership with Beacon Chain, the blockchain explorer that we're working with. So obviously they can identify any Rocket Pool validators, and they are giving us a nice little flare accordingly. One of the next things they're working on is this guy here. Beacon Chain has a wonderful service for receiving email notifications if anything happens to your validator, such as it goes offline and you should probably go take a look at it, or you proposed a block or anything like that. They have this amazing service here. I'll click on it. It's going to yell at me because I'm not logged in, but that's fine. So make an account with them, do that, and in the near future, Rocket Pool related things will show up on there as well. So anytime like you hit a new rewards checkpoint, that will show up as a notification. There's a new version of the smart node that you need to go get, that'll give you a notification. You successfully grabbed your rewards during a checkpoint, that'll give you a notification. You got slashed on the Beacon Chain, that'll give you a notification. We're working with them to basically get anything that is relevant to users into their notification system. And
That's
all you have to
great.
do is subscribe to them. Yeah.
As a solo staker, I rely on those notifications quite a bit. So
Yes.
it's great to know that they're going to be integrated into Rocket Pool.
On that note, is it easy to integrate the client monitoring from Beacon Chain into the smart node?
So that's actually something that we're working on as well. I'm in close contact with Patrick from over there, and he has given me a repository that shows what his thing looks like. Effectively, under the hood, it is more or less the same as the node exporter, which is one of the things we use for getting metrics into Prometheus, which shows you that nice dashboard. So there's nothing stopping us from adding that as well in a future version. And that way, whatever metrics Beacon Chain reports, we can report all of that kind of stuff through that channel too.
I am literally going to hang a monitor on my wall with that dashboard. Like I've always
So conveniently
about that.
enough, I bought a separate Pi just so I can hook up a 4K monitor to it, because Pi 4s can do 4K at 60 hertz, and it's going to be sideways, and it's just going to have my dashboard showing me everything that's going on. Yeah.
That's going to be awesome. We should all do that. All right. Does anyone have anything else to add? So Michael, did you want to talk some more about POAPs?
Yeah, let's go over that. So the POAP for today's call is all set, and I believe everyone has been able to claim that. That's been on the live stream. I've got a different POAP, a second POAP that's splashed up now. And so kind of circling back to, the jokes of Superfizz asking, when mainnet launch, the EthStaker crew, along with some OGs of the Rocket Pool Discord, have come together, and we're formally launching what we're titling the Rocket Pool Pre-Launch Systems Check campaign. Now, what this is a sort of sequence of signals that you can use as to gauge the imminent launch of Rocket Pool. And we've got 8 distinct milestones laid out on the EthStaker website, ethstaker.cc, this workshop being one of them. The others, just to give some insight, are the completion of the Trail of Bits audit, the Rocket Pool AMA, the Great Cell Wall, the Calm Before the Storm live stream, the final article being released, and ultimately the lead up to the mainnet launch. And then we're also doing a exclusive POAP for the first 1,000 validators after launch is completed. This can be found, again, this is at ethstaker.cc. Scan the POAP for today. This is the start of this campaign. What's ultimately going to happen is once Rocket Pool is launched, we will host a POAP.fun raffle wherein all of these 8 POAPs will be used to raffle off an exclusive Rocket Pool NFT poster. This is much like the first poster that was minted on the Rocket Pool Discord, the decentralization poster as it's being coined. So it's just a fun little thing to celebrate all of the hard work that Rocket Pool has done already and on their way to completing as we progress through the mainnet launch. So again, if the QR code doesn't work, I've tested it, it should, but if it doesn't, the website URL to claim is poap.website/RC7 precheck. And all of those details are on the EthStaker website as well.
So if I can summarize that, the road to Rocket Pool launch is 7 POAPs. The first one is available tonight as this validator workshop. There was some confusion about whether there would be multiple POAPs, but the POAP that we're offering tonight under RC7 precheck is the first of 7 that will be part of the rollout, which I think, shout out to VGR for getting this set up and to Michael for designing those. It's a really exciting way to move closer to launch. So great work, guys.
Yeah, I'd just like to add too, guys. Yeah, we are super appreciative of all that work. We do have a lot of stuff going on, so it's really, really good just to see like the community aspect step up in that regard. Like we are totally appreciative of that. We don't always have time to say that, but we are. So yeah, very, very huge thanks to you guys for that. And also massive props to Joe today. I just want to add, that was an epic stream, and I don't think he messed up once. Like that. By any streaming standards, that's immensely impressive. So
I mean, I hope I wouldn't mess up. I wrote the thing, right?
Work. What's that?
I said, I hope I wouldn't mess up. I wrote the thing. That would be super embarrassing.
Mate, this stuff always goes wrong when you do live workshops, but not today. So
I'm just glad they didn't send me a dud and all the hardware worked out of the box, because that would have sucked.
It's very impressive. Michael does a great job with post engineering, so I'm sure he'll get this sliced up so that anybody who needs to follow can find exactly what they're looking for. And I look forward to really also getting that Grafana stuff out in a separate publication so that we can share that and be proud of it as a community, because it's incredible. So thanks to the whole Rocket Pool team for, as an end user, sometimes it feels like it takes forever. But I also have to commend you guys for not jumping the gun and doing something foolish that puts us all at risk. So that's a big deal. I appreciate that.
Yeah, no, we've definitely made sure to check our boxes before launch. We do cop a little bit for it, but like I said earlier, I think this is by far the best version of Rocket Pool that would be hitting mainnet relatively soon. Just basically because like we could have launched, after our second betas, after 2 audits, a lot of people would have thought, that's enough. But yeah, we identified some pretty big points which we thought would definitely need some work. I mean, we could have launched and upgraded potential contracts after launch and stuff, but that's that's not a way to do a smooth launch. You want to have all your ducks in a row first, make sure it's, you know, as clean as you can. And yeah, and that's what we've hopefully done.
Yeah.
David, real quick, I know this is completely off track here. Is that a banana behind you? Like actually?
Yes, it is.
Is it? Okay.
It's standard issue for Rocket Pool team members.
I've
I don't know if you
inspired
saw
him.
Langers eating one earlier. Except, it wasn't in the fridge though, so I think Joe's gone rogue on that one.
Yep.
Yep.
Yeah.
If you want me to send you
Honestly,
mine,
who puts a
it'll
banana in
probably
a
survive
fridge?
the trip. We
Yeah.
have to find some good way to sacrifice this thing.
So we will plan to get together with Rocket Pool a couple more times before launch. This is something we're all looking forward to, and I'm glad to be on this road with everyone. So thanks again for everyone's time, and we'll see you all soon.
Thanks, guys.
Thanks, Fizz.
Take care.
Thank you very much, guys. Cheers. Thanks for having us.